It is 4 p.m. on November 15th, 2022, and we're going to get started with the City of Iowa City work session. I want to welcome all of our counselors and staff back, and welcome to everyone in the audience and that is watching online. I want to make note that our Mayor Pro Tem Alter is online, and Councilor John Thomas will not be attending today. We're going to start with the first agenda item, which is presentation on Housing First, Progress and Opportunities. I'll go ahead and just welcome Chrissy Canganelli from the Shelter House. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you this afternoon. In the audience, we have Shelter House staff, board members, current and past, and several community champions who have supported our journey along the way. This room has not always been a welcoming space for me. Going back to my first years with Shelter House, then Emergency Housing Project, we were neither invited nor welcome to speak on behalf of our organization and the people whom we served. City staff consulted Shelter House staff and chose the information to be relayed on our behalf. Changing that norm was not an easy thing to do. 20 years ago, it was understood that we were to keep our heads down. Although we were sorely under-resourced, to speak candidly of our needs and challenges was to risk losing what little we had. We were necessary, but barely tolerated. When we proposed building a larger shelter, we were received with disdain and contempt, confronted by opposition from all directions, save our faith partners and individual community members who supported us. Public meetings with audiences that packed this room before City Council, Board of Adjustments, and Planning and Zoning Commission. The room crackling with frustration, fear, and anger directed at Shelter House, directed at me, all because we dared to do better. Years later, when we proposed a low-barrier winter shelter, it was a similar experience. While there had been a clear and affirming change within the city and the council, there was still ardent opposition from property owners. Although not the same numbers, this room was no more welcoming then. These are my memories as I walk into this room. Not of your doing, not of anyone's in this room today, but they are a part of our shared history and learned experience of this community as we begin the conversation this afternoon. We are in a new space with new people, and while not entirely new challenges, they are coming into conflict with new expectations and sensitivities. This evening, we're here to talk about the changes that have occurred within Shelter House, changes in our approach to services for people experiencing homelessness in our community, and the challenges we face today. We're here to provide clarity and to answer your questions. To better understand our current state, we must start at the beginning. Shelter House was founded in 1983 by what was then known as the Ecumenical Council, later known as the Consultation of Religious Communities. The founding purpose was to provide emergency shelter with a special focus on persons seeking medical attention and family members accompanying them, a strain that continues to challenge our operations today. CDBG funds were awarded by the city and used to purchase an old house on the north side of Iowa City. With volunteer support, a shelter was opened. It was fire marshal full at 29, providing little more than somewhere to sleep for single adults and families, whether it be a bed, couch, recliner, or mat on the floor. Over time, and as resources were added, the volunteer model shifted to paid staff. When I joined in 1998, there were a total of 3.75 full-time equivalents, including myself. Not enough people then to do the work that was being done, but nevertheless, the work got done. We followed the service approach that was prevalent across the nation for homeless shelters: Housing Ready. Housing Ready was the standard, if not singular, approach among homeless service providers, Shelter House included, for decades. Housing Ready subordinates access to permanent housing to other requirements such as sobriety, employment, and med compliance, with the expectation that individuals must address these issues that may have led to their homelessness and essentially earn their way back into housing. The approach was expected and even required of us by our funders, both private and public. It is how we demonstrated accountability to our funders and good stewardship to our community. And it was wrong. Rules around sobriety, employment, and other program requirements meant some of the sickest and most vulnerable among us were vetted out. But this is what we all knew, and it was at the time unchallenged across the nation. Things started to change with the implementation of the Hearth Act in 2009, but these changes were slow to reach Iowa, with the first transitions to a new low-barrier approach beginning in 2012, and certainly not in our shelter environments until many years later. From the day I started at Emergency Housing Project, it was clear we had a capacity issue. By 2004, the population of Johnson County had increased by 40% since opening in 1983. We denied shelter due to lack of bed space most every night of the year. Structural shifts and changes in the economy, welfare policy changes, erosion of pay, and increasing housing costs meant increasing numbers of people seeking shelter across the nation, and yes, here at home. A significant shift of who was experiencing homelessness also occurred, changing from the majority being single adults to more and more families. Locally, the University of Iowa hospitals and clinics, and VA Medical Center served to amplify our local challenges. The capacity limitations at the Gilbert Street shelter were felt most urgently during the winter months. And while there were livestock warnings advising farmers to get cattle and livestock out from the cold, there were no such warnings or concerns for our neighbors. A larger shelter was needed, but it was clear it would be years in the making. We turned to our founding partners, the faith community, and they leaned in. Standing by our side, faith leaders declared, "We can and must do better," and together we did. Persisting through all manner of code challenges and required updates to buildings, the Winter Overflow program opened with about 18 participating churches and hundreds of volunteers. It was intended to be a temporary stopgap until Shelter House was able to build a larger shelter on land we had purchased in 2004. It was a partnership that ran many more years than was expected. Even with the Winter Overflow, people were vetted out. Background checks and breathalyzer tests were common practice. If you were intoxicated or otherwise deemed unable to stay, you were not getting a cot or a bed. You were not going to stay at shelter or going to overflow. The approach wasn't questioned. Folks remained in their camps or sought shelter in stairwells of parking ramps, and on the coldest nights, walked the halls of our hospitals or came into City Hall and slept on the lobby floor. We persisted with the Housing Ready model as providers across our state, the region, and throughout the country continued to do. After years of legal opposition resulting in a precedent-setting decision by the Iowa Supreme Court in 2008, Shelter House finally persevered in the campaign to develop a new emergency shelter. In November 2010, construction of the 70-bed shelter at 429 Southgate Avenue was completed, and we moved in immediately. The capacity of 70 was not built to meet an actual, real demand for shelter countywide. It was restricted by code, limited by parking requirements, and a direct result of the legal opposition to the project. We immediately hit capacity. The Winter Overflow program through the faith communities had ended with the opening of the new shelter. We were once again in need of additional bed capacity as we went into the winter of 2011. Again, with faith partners by our side, we approached the city seeking permission for increased shelter capacity during the winter months. Each winter since, Shelter House seeks and is awarded a special use permit authorizing an increase of shelter capacity by an additional 30 sleeping spaces. Overflow is available in the lobby of the shelter and opens at 10:30 p.m. for folks above and beyond the base of 70 guests. In 2011, as in the preceding years, the commitment to Housing Ready approach remained unchallenged. During the winter of 2013 to 2014, the polar vortex hit Iowa. While our shelter was full, anywhere from 10 to 20 people were seeking shelter and relief from the bitter cold, night after night in the lobby of City Hall. With no bathroom facilities and limited space, there were significant challenges. The Iowa City Police Department approached the local homeless coordinating board in the spring of 2014 in the hope that a new approach be considered in preparation for the 2014-2015 winter. The consensus of the local homeless coordinating board was that Shelter House would take the lead in developing a low-barrier shelter to be made available during the winter months, ensuring a warm, dry space for the coldest nights of the year, removing rules and sobriety requirements experienced as barriers by so many people in need. This was the first overt indication of our intention to reduce barriers to services and begin the hard and necessary work of shifting to a housing-first approach. This was the beginning of what would prove over time to be a paradigm shift in our approach to homeless services, a shift and change to housing first. Beyond the first responders and medical providers who saw a low-barrier shelter as a much-needed resource and relief to their burden of care, consideration of opening a low-barrier winter shelter was not a popular proposition. There was not a groundswell of support. At the time, it was considered a high-risk, if not radical, proposition, a decision that required consideration and discernment even within the Shelter House board. But there was a single voice who challenged, if not us, then who? And if not us, then what do we stand for? And so we did, what we were called to do. Shelter House staff worked with partners, including a local developer, to secure a vacant commercial space which was donated for the winter. It was in good proximity to the Shelter House and other services known to be frequented by people in need. Property owners and neighbors opposed the proposed temporary use of the space and petitioned the City Council. In an indication of the changing times, the temporary use was approved and Shelter House moved forward with the low-barrier winter shelter, which opened in January of 2015. We've operated the winter shelter each year since. Each year we were required to find and secure a new location. At no time has there ever been a date by which we could guarantee opening or a date through which we were required to remain open. That is until 2021. Calls for service to the police and ambulance dropped precipitously during the hours of the low-barrier winter shelter. Our hospitals stopped seeing people in their emergency rooms with exposure and frostbite or burns as they tried to stay warm in their tents. Shelter House began building support for and raising the awareness of the need for a different approach, housing first, and a new and more permanent solution to homelessness, permanent supportive housing. From 2015 through 2017, there was a very clear difference between the low-barrier winter shelter and the shelter at 429 Southgate Avenue, as at 429 Southgate, we still screened people out based on sobriety. And while we had started reducing barriers in other program areas, such as rapid rehousing, it wasn't until 2018 that we fully aligned emergency shelter and all Shelter House services to embrace a housing-first approach. From that point forward, the winter shelter provided additional and much-needed emergency shelter capacity, but there was no difference in approach between the two shelters. All emergency shelter was low barrier and continues to be. In January 2019, Shelter House opened Cross Park Place, a permanent supportive housing project providing 24 one-bedroom apartments and a permanent home, if chosen, for people for whom homelessness had become a chronic condition. People who had lived on our streets for decades, people with disabling health and mental health conditions. The approach was and is steadfastly housing first. We do everything radically possible to help people maintain their housing. In January 2021, winter shelter services moved to a permanent location provided by the county. It is a space built for the intended use with bathroom and laundry facilities. It is a space for which we are deeply grateful. Shelter House has access to the building beginning November 15th and must vacate the property by April 1st. Winter shelter has become a source of confusion and consternation and even outrage in our community. There is no set date that winter shelter is to start, no set date it ends. We've been condemned for not opening on time or too late and closing too early. Last winter, when members of the public shared their frustration over what they were framing as our lack of preparedness and failure to open on time, no one stopped to ask if anyone was actually denied shelter due to capacity. I will share tonight, as we shared then, no one was denied shelter due to a lack of bed capacity last winter, pre or post opening the winter shelter. This year, overflow at 429 Southgate building started on November 10th. It opens as it has in years past at 10:30 p.m. each night. Winter shelter is a seasonal service. Staffing for the winter shelter was always a challenge, as Shelter House was competing directly with other seasonal employment. The pandemic has so disrupted our employment market that our challenges have become another level. Amplifying this strain is the fact that even though we have increased our pay rates for our frontline staff, we are not able to compete with new and increased employment opportunities from other crisis response service providers that are fully publicly funded. In the past year, we have leaned heavily on a range of recruitment strategies. We've increased wages and benefits, implemented sign-on retentions and shift coverage bonuses. We've reached out to the United Way and faith communities for volunteers. However, the reality is the skills needed to manage our work through a housing first lens is not conducive to general volunteer support. As we prepared to ramp up for winter shelter this year, we went into August with a 45-shift weekly deficit, meaning we would have 45 uncovered shifts each week across 4 facilities requiring coverage, 3 of which require 24/7 staffing. Today, our deficit is down to 15 open shifts per week, with 10 of those in emergency shelter. The current operating budget we'd like to share with you, and on this slide you'll see 2 different pie charts. The one on the left is the budget for FY22, so our budget for this year. We're on the calendar year for Shelter House. And the left pie chart is the emergency shelter budget, operating budget. This total budget in FY22 is about $1.34 million. About $1 million is payroll, taxes and benefits. And for the purposes of discussion this evening, we've removed all administrative and fundraising costs that would have been tied as a percentage to the emergency shelter budget. We just wanted to focus on what does this service cost our community with no indirect or admin fundraising costs. This year, the base pay for facility coordinators, the frontline staff working first, second, and third shifts, was $15 an hour, a 40% increase over the pre-pandemic starting wage. The balance of expenses for everything are from everything from utilities, gas, electric, and water, insurance, property and equipment, maintenance, and supplies, toilet paper, cleaning supplies, food. So about $1 million in payroll and about $340,000 in all of these other necessary costs. For the organization, administration and fundraising is about 13% of our budget overall. That's from our 2021 990 report. And our total budget for FY22 is $5.25 million. The total operating budget includes everything from emergency shelter, coordinated entry, street outreach, rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, supported employment, eviction prevention, administration, and fundraising. This does not include capital improvements and debt repayment. So again, on the pie charts, now if we look at the sourcing of emergency shelter, we've tried to break out and look at how we're funding this service. And as you'll see, 16% is coming from our local public funders. That's Johnson County, City of Iowa City, North Liberty, and Coralville. And the 19% is from our state and federal funding sources that are restricted for emergency shelter. So a total of 35% of emergency shelter services in our community are publicly resourced. 65%, that gap, is sourced by private funding, whether it's individual gifts from faith communities, local businesses, fundraising activities, our solicitations, and our own endowment. If I broke it out in yet another way, all the dedicated funding sources from our local public funders combined would cover, in that 16% of our budget, 58 days out of the calendar year. If I add in the state and federal sources, it's another 19%, or 67 days of the year. I say all this and want to emphasize that we're incredibly grateful for the support that we receive from our local public funders. We couldn't do this work without you. But just trying to start this conversation and contextualize as these shifting changes and expectations have been happening, we're still very heavily privately sourced for this work. And then on the broader context as well, just to show that for Shelter House operating budget, 5% of our operating budget is driven by local public funders, and 95% is all other funding sources. Further challenging our current budget reality is the fact that Shelter House carries substantial debt for new construction and permanent supportive housing and renovation of existing properties. Once the 501 Southgate Avenue construction project is closed, the total debt is estimated at over $5 million, with roughly half of this sourced by a private commercial lender, and they're in interest-bearing. Of the total debt, $2.5 million is at 0% interest, with the majority payable of to the Housing Trust Fund of Johnson County, for which we are very grateful for, and Ellen McCabe is here in the audience. We wouldn't be able to do the work that we've done without her support. Our annual debt obligation now is $105,600. Next year, it increases to $240,000. The debt is a deliberate choice, incurred singularly by Shelter House, building capacity and shifting our paradigm from managing homelessness to ending it, developing permanent housing with broad support from our community and public and private stakeholders, developing housing solutions known to save lives, taking on substantial risk to step in and provide housing that wasn't occurring anywhere else in the community. In 1983, there was no public mandate to provide shelter, and there isn't one today. Through the years, the expectations and understandings of our community have changed. There is today a growing social mandate and expectation that all people should be guaranteed access to safe and decent shelter. We agree. In fact, the people you are looking at in the audience here tonight would expand on that expectation and include housing. But we're here tonight to talk about emergency shelter. We're neither built nor resourced to meet this expectation and growing social mandate. We must be resourced differently if we are to keep up with the work we are already doing, let alone to give consideration to increasing our capacity to better respond to whatever crisis next presents itself. We are being consulted by providers across Iowa and neighboring states, communities and providers interested in replicating our work and our approach. We do not need a new passion project or new boutique response. We need you to invest in a proven and steadfast partner at a different level and in a different way. It's one thing to talk about the reality of the work and another thing entirely to hear it described in detail. I've asked Rachel Lehman, Emergency Services Director, and Aaron Sullivan, Housing Services Director, to share their personal experience to illustrate what it has meant for us to embrace a housing-first approach for emergency shelter to permanent housing.
Welcome.
Hi. Good afternoon. My name is Erin Sullivan, and I'm the Housing Services Director for Shelter House. That means I oversee both short-term and long-term housing interventions for people experiencing homelessness. I also oversee street outreach and employment services. These are vastly different programs with extremes in terms of what the work looks like. To give you a sense of what this looks like from day to day, I will describe a recent day in detail. I'll be candid. Deciding what day to describe wasn't an easy task. And though everyone says every day is different when describing their jobs, when you work with people in crisis, every day is so different. This day, last Thursday, is a normal day to the extent that there is such a thing. I wake up at 5:30. I have 75 minutes personally to walk my dogs, eat breakfast, make my son's lunch, review my schedule for the day, and kind of scroll through social media and get dressed and get ready. At 6:45, I wake up my son. I help him I make breakfast. He eats, and we pull up the weather app and we look at the weather. And we usually have an argument over whether it's too cold for him to wear shorts. It is. He gets dressed, and I send him back to his room because he wore the same sweatshirt yesterday. He puts on a clean sweatshirt, brushes his teeth, and I do his hair. Before we leave, he feeds the dogs. At 7:45, I've dropped my son off at Grantwood Elementary, and I drive to the gym. I lift weights for 30 minutes, and I then shower and get ready for work at the gym. I then arrive at my office at 501 Southgate Avenue. I make a cup of tea, I log into my computer, and I open the software that runs our electronic door system and manually unlock the 501 admin front door entrance because the system has a glitch that we haven't yet been able to fix. I open my email, answer 3 time-sensitive emails, and then check in with staff at the front desks at 501 and/or Cross Park Place. This morning, I chat briefly with Allison, who's the coordinator at 501, and then listened to a tenant as a tenant asked for my attention to talk about a concern about their neighbor. When folks move indoors after experiencing chronic homelessness, having neighbors is a huge adjustment that we help each work through. On days like this Thursday, my first hour is usually my favorite. I get the opportunity to connect with tenants, listen to their stories, and help solve whatever issues might arise. At 9:30, I attend the coordinated entry meeting with partners from the VA Medical Center, HACAP, Mobile Crisis, Johnson County Social Services, General Assistance, Prelude, Waypoint, the Institute for Community Alliance, Abbey Mental Health Center, DVIP, and United Actions for Youth. Today is, as usual, rapid-fire conversation of VI SPDAT scores who rise to the top of a list. VI SPDAT is a numerical score that measures the likelihood that an individual will die on the streets. I don't think about this when I am in this meeting. I pulled 2 clients for an open unit in our permanent supported housing, or PSH program. One actually signed their lease and moved into housing on Monday afternoon. The second moved into their home today. Both new tenants have experienced homelessness for more than 12 months. At 10 a.m., I log off the Zoom, and then I respond to some Teams messages from a staff member letting me know that we're out of envelopes, and I log into Shelter House's Amazon account to order them. I emailed the PSH program managers to let them know we had 2 individuals who were pulled today, and they're going to be moving into one of the open units. And I asked them to enter them into the PSH project in our homeless management information system. I send Teams messages to see what manager can conduct this morning's interview with an applicant, and unfortunately no one is available, so I will plan on attending. At 10:20, our street outreach staff named Sam stops by my office, and we problem solve about an emergency shelter guest who was recently hospitalized and then discharged to emergency shelter. The guest does not have a cell phone to receive appointment reminders, so I do everything that I can to help them get to their appointments. Yesterday, I logged into CareLink to check their appointment time and saw that it was today. I messaged Sham yesterday to inform him of the appointment and asked him to reach out to the guest about how they plan to get to their appointment. Sam worked with the guest to make those plans, and he ended up transporting them to UIHC for their appointment. The guest asked to see the doctor and then refused any further treatment. Sam is concerned because he knows the client tends to sleep outside when their mental health declines and the weather is turning cold at night. I pulled up CareLink and saw that the next appointment for this individual at UHC was a full month away, and I emailed the RN to get the guest scheduled for an earlier appointment. At 10:45, I met with Nicole, who is our Rapid Rehousing program manager, to discuss the remaining funds available to assist with security deposits and rent to individuals moving out of shelter and into apartments. With approximately 6 weeks left in this year, we plan a strategy that will maximize the limiting remaining funds to support as many households as possible. At 11:30, I conduct that 30-minute interview with an applicant for a coordinator position. And then as soon as that meeting's done, that interview's done at 12, I go to the bathroom, I microwave my lunch, and I respond to some more emails. And I also make note that I'm going to call that candidate tomorrow morning and offer them the position. Scott, our facility maintenance manager, stops by my office to update me on the progress of a radon test at one of our lodge houses. He's submitting a report to the city for our rental permit renewal. At 12:30, I met with Mark, our assistant executive director. We discussed program manager workloads and assess whether we need to distribute the work more evenly. We review the org chart, discuss the number of shelter house-owned properties each manager oversees, look at the hours of operation for each building, assess the caseload sizes, and redistribute the work accordingly. At 1:30, I respond to emails about the next week's site clinic at Emergency Shelter, about coordinating the agenda for the lunch and learn about W-9s and 1099s, and about a Cross Park Place tenant requesting modifications to their unit. Then at 2 p.m., this is not on my schedule, unplanned, there's an altercation between 3 tenants at 501. The staff on duty asks for help. 2 of the tenants are arguing with their neighbors about having items outside of their apartment, and 1 tenant pushes the staff member as she works to de-escalate. Disagreeing with neighbors is common. It is common at all apartments across the city. This particular argument differs because 501 tenants often have complex trauma histories, and the aftermath of this disagreement created hours of emotional processing. Our afternoon and evening staff members work with the involved tenants who were very concerned that the staff member might have been harmed. They were concerned for her safety. They were worried that they would go to jail and distraught by the entire argument. Staff reassured them that everyone was okay, they would not be going to jail, and talked them through their emotional processing of what had happened. Later, I reviewed video footage to identify what went well and brainstormed ideas on how to handle similar situations in the future. At 3:30, I quickly transitioned to a virtual meeting with our IT company to discuss why we didn't have access to the 2 camera angles. At 4:15, I respond to messages from staff to coordinate pickup for a department credit card to have a vehicle towed, to respond whether I have time to attend a team meeting next week for a tenant, and to coordinate with HR to schedule onboarding for newly hired employees. At 5 p.m., I left work to pick up my son. While driving, I received a call from Bryson, the 501 program manager, who was concerned about a tenant who was hospitalized for the last 4 months with an heart infection. The tenant had been receiving IV antibiotics through a PICC line, but he left the rehab center against medical advice and returned to his apartment. I arrived at Grantwood Elementary, and as I sat in the parking lot, Bryson shared his concerns that the tenant who uses substances intravenously might use that PICC line. He is concerned about the tenant's safety. I hang up the phone with Bryson and immediately call Dr. Abrams, who provides the on-site psychiatric services bi-weekly. Dr. Abrams, who is also in his car leaving work for the day, decides it is necessary to come to 501, assess the tenant himself, and determine the next steps. I explained to Dr. Abrams that the tenant is refusing to go to the ED for the PICC line to be removed because he is afraid he will be forced to stay in the hospital for an extended period of time. Dr. Abrams reaches out to an infectious disease physician at UIHC about how to manage care for the tenant he was about to go meet with in that tenant's unit. At 5:30, I walk into Grantwood and pick up my son. We head home, make dinner, do homework, and read. Once he is asleep, I spend a couple of hours getting caught up on email before I head to bed myself.
Welcome.
Today is Tuesday. It was not an exceptional Tuesday, and it resembled the other 6 days of the week. Today was filled with difficulties, with immense worry, with sadness, but also relief, hope, and joy. What is difficult? A woman with untreated schizophrenia who has experienced homelessness for 2 years. She has such fear about eating, I'm concerned about her rapid weight loss. a 75-year-old veteran who has been in and out of the hospital with stage 4 cancer. He struggles to change his colostomy bag in the shelter each day, and no one is around to help him. A woman with untreated schizophrenia who my staff are gravely concerned about because they fear she is a victim of sex trafficking out of a local hotel. A mother with a young infant who has a high fever who comes to us because she cannot afford fever reducer. A woman with an intellectual disability who has contracted lice because she does not understand how to use the lice treatment. I do it for her. A young man who was hit by a car while riding his bike to a job interview. Now he has a brain injury and part of his skull has been removed. He wears a helmet to protect his brain and is severely impaired. These are just some of the things that are difficult on this Tuesday. My work at this stage in my life as Director of Emergency Services requires all of me, and so does my wife and our 6 children. But when I'm here, all of me is here. I supervise over 30 staff, ensure the shelter is running smoothly, direct a volunteer program, manage Shelter House's eviction prevention programs, operate coordinated entry for all of Johnson and Washington County, all while I am worrying about opening winter shelter. I have been worrying since July, facing immense staffing shortages much like other employers in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. I am terrified we won't be able to open it when our neighbors and community members need it most in the bitter cold of winter. Interviewing and hiring and training and training and training, because it takes a certain kind of person to do this work. And for frontline staff, their Tuesdays are much like mine. I've been in this field long enough to know what happens when folks don't have access to shelter in the winter. People die. And maybe that sounds intense or too much, or maybe it even sounds like an exaggeration, but it isn't. People die because of the cold, because of untreated mental illness, because of co-occurring substance use disorders, because of lack of access to medical care. So, I worry. I worry each day we have 20 people seeking shelter and all 70 beds are full. I worry when I receive a call from the school district that a mother and her 4 children slept under a bridge last night, and our family rooms are full. Thank goodness a family moved into housing this morning, and we could move them in to the room, but I worry. I worry because I see the weary looks on my staff's faces. They have been working overtime for several months because they believe in this work and they know how real these staffing shortages are. I worry because some days I am bone tired when I arrive at my own home and struggle to be present with my own family. But I will tell you this, there is so much joy in this work. When you lose everything you have and end up in a shelter or on the street, the most devastating thing that you lose is hope. And still, every single day, I watch my staff and staff all across the organization walk alongside people on their journey through crisis. It is ultimately a journey of rebuilding hope, of creating stability, of rebuilding light and joy and belief that things could turn out okay, good even. And to see the smile on someone's face when they get their keys, when they sign their lease, land the job, reconnect with family, they make all my worry worth it, every last bit. Because this work is not about me, it's about the people that we serve. And on this Tuesday, I was in our lobby and a person walked in exclaiming, "They promoted me, they promoted me." On this Tuesday, I visited someone I've known for years in the hospital. For years, they have experienced homelessness while suffering from untreated, severe, and debilitating mental illness. The last time I saw them, they were so unwell, I thought they were going to die. They couldn't communicate, they couldn't comprehend anything going on around them, and had lost everything. And on this Tuesday, when I walked on that inpatient unit to visit them, they said, "Hi, Rachel. It is so good to see you," with a smile across their face that I will never forget, not for the rest of my life. So on this Tuesday, I'm here before you to say this. This work is hard. This work is devastating. And this work is worth every second of worry and hardship and exhaustion to help members of this community rebuild their lives. Thank you.
you. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you. Echo again. Thanks for the opportunity. Hopefully this, I have a little chance for some dialogue tonight, and hopefully this will encourage more dialogue in the future. I'm here to talk a little bit more globally about services than what Aaron and Rachel talked about, what happens in one day of the life of Shelter House employee. Mainly about who we serve, our limitations that we have, and how we prioritize our funds, and even how we communicate. As I'm sure you're aware by listening to those stories, that every individual we serve is in crisis or has recently been in crisis. Every last one of them is living in poverty, and every one of them deals with more trauma than anybody in this room could ever imagine. And when people are in crisis, it's helpful or even necessary for them to share their story and draw attention to what is happening to them. Talk about their crisis to get their needs met. It's resourceful and canny, and it works sometimes. Even when there's more to a given story than what is either publicly shared or sent in an email to you or in a phone call to city staff, we don't respond to that publicly. Why? Because our duty's with the client. You know, there are a lot of missing details in many of the stories that can make the story complete, but our job isn't to talk about client stories in a public setting. We don't do it. Our duty is to the client. We will not correct the record at the instance of not protecting client privacy. The reality of the work that we do, though, as you heard Aaron and Rachel talking, there is much more need in our community than what we can actually ever provide. That's no different than any other city in the state of Iowa. That's no other different than probably any city in the country. The way we deal with this is to prioritize our services and to serve people who have the most pressing needs and the highest needs, as we talked about, as Chrissy talked about with Housing First. We use a process called coordinated entry or coordinated intake for this. We use objective criteria to try to make all of our decisions as equitable as possible and serve the people that have the highest needs. For example, one that happens every day. We have one family room open, as Rachel talked about, as a reality sometime, and there are two families that are seeking shelter. Family one is a family that's sleeping, a family of three that is sleeping in their car, and family two is a family of three that is staying at a friend's house. The situation is semi-volatile over there, but they don't maybe have to be out until the weekend. So we provide shelter to family one who has more immediate pressing crisis need at that time. Those are hard decisions to make, and those decisions get made all day, every day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This is how we make decisions on who we serve, how long we can serve households in all of our programs, whether it's emergency shelter, eviction prevention, rapid rehousing, and permanent supportive housing. It's also worth noting, that we typically always work federal rules, contracts that all have specific regulations on how we can serve people, how much money we can do, the length of assistance, income requirements, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, as I'm sure you're aware of. You know, for instance, there are some funding streams that allow for 6 months of assistance for somebody, for rental assistance, but they have to be consecutive. And after 3 months, we had a household recently that talked to their faith community that they're involved, and they wanted to get involved, and they paid their 4th month rent for them. And then they came to us and said, can you now pay month 5, 6, and 7? We can't, because that federal assistance was broken up during that time, and we couldn't. And that was tough for us to do and to talk to them about. One of our eviction prevention can pay a maximum of 6 months of arrears at any given time. And when somebody owes arrears more than that, we are unable to pay it. The maximum is 6 months. And when somebody has 9 months, which happened a lot of times, especially when the eviction moratorium were lifted, the amount of arrears that people had and the amount of months, some people we just couldn't help. And those were hard decisions to make. We negotiated with landlords at times, but not all landlords would take partial payment, and some people ended up being evicted because of that. It wasn't because of the lack of what we do. We work in federal requirements and contracts that we have to do. I just bring up a few of these examples with the different rules and regulations because we do work diligently to assist all people with a program that will provide the most assistance to them with the least barriers for them to access it. But we are good stewards of the money, and we do have decisions we have to make because of that. And unfortunately, that means meeting these stringent regulatory and compliance pieces. So I want to leave you with this, though. We're always open for dialogue about situations, whether it's a specific case that someone has asked you about, whether it's city staff, you as city council, or more global issues and concerns about systems that may be broken in our community, and there are some. If something doesn't feel right, ask us. We'll be transparent with you. We'll talk to you. Can't promise you that I'll share detailed client information about a specific story, but we will talk to you, and we will be open about decisions and why we've made them, because we're very confident that we make them objectively, and we do the best we can with the limited access of resources that we have. So thanks.
Welcome, Christine.
Housing first isn't just a phrase in much the same way that housing is a human right isn't simply a catchy bumper sticker slogan. They're intimately connected. The Housing First model recognizes that housing is the foundation upon which a life can be built. One cannot stabilize without housing, one cannot find employment without housing, and a person most certainly cannot tend to their most critical medical, mental, and physical health conditions without housing. Housing is a stabilizing force, a necessary respite, and a genuine and true human right that is not limited to those who can meet a prescribed set of preconditions. Despite expanding services and functionally removing barriers to shelter and housing, Shelter House continues to serve adults, children, and families at the same rate from year to year in our emergency shelter. Last year, for example, 16% of guests in emergency shelter were children. Now, how do we do this? We do this while honoring the Housing First model, because low barrier is not synonymous with anything goes. Frequently, we get asked, how could you possibly be low barrier when there are children on site? How can you have an individual who is intoxicated or using drugs while children are on site? But the Housing First model is a harm reduction approach that is trauma-informed. It focuses on behaviors, not chemistry. It is a behavior that would limit a person from a shelter, not what they do or do not have in their bodies, whether or not a person is currently using a substance. This doesn't just recognize, but it prioritizes the shared humanity of every individual who walks through our doors. Because here's the thing, people in crisis aren't scary. Individuals experiencing homelessness are not dangerous. The adults, children, and families who walk through the door, any of our doors, deserve a safe place to rest every bit as much as you do or as much as I do. And the truth is, this is not easy. Training staff to interact with clients and guests using trauma-informed care takes time. It takes patience, and it takes grit. It costs real money, so when we lose staff to turnover, we invest anew in the next person to fill that role each and every time. But it's the ethos of the work we do at Shelter House, and this is work that is guided by heart and head. Chrissy talked to you about heart and head in giving the history of the work that we have done at Shelter since 1983. Aaron talked about heart and head in dealing with a crisis in the 501 building earlier last week. And in talking about every day that she turns on to a coordinated entry call and hears the word VI SPDAT, but you do that work. You do that work as a number, even while in your heart you know that number is the difference between life and death. So this is what we're doing. This is what we're doing each and every day at Shelter House, and this is the work that makes it. It's what makes it all worthwhile. It's the heart and it's the head, and it's the absolute adherence to the idea and the notion and the belief of everyone in this room that housing is, in reality, a human right, and the Housing First approach is the only way that we could administer that in good conscience. And we would love to take questions and begin a dialogue to the extent that you all are ready to engage or have thoughts.
Thanks to all of you for coming forth and sharing with the council. I do want to remind us that we do have Mayor Pro Tem Alter that is attending this meeting virtually. And so, Mayor Pro Tem, you can certainly chime in whenever you're ready. But council is up for us to engage in any dialogue that we wish at this time.
I'd just like to thank each and every one of you, the staff and everybody that's present. I mean, very compelling story, and you're just so passionate about your work. It just brings me to tears, and I know there's a need out there, and you're doing what you can, and you're working very hard, and that's so apparent, and thank you for everything that you do and for coming today to talk to us.
I mean, not simple question. What do you need the city to do? What do you need the county to do? What do you need the state to do to improve the situation of your funding and of our ability to house people first?
You laid it on heavy with that one, Janice. I think there's a short-term and then a longer-term conversation that could and should happen. In the short term, we need to manage expectations for this winter in and around shelter. And we need your support and understanding and trust that we are doing everything possible to hire up to the levels that we need to safely staff these different buildings and deliver this service, whether it's emergency shelter or housing. Long term, the ability to have a conversation and really lean into this growing social mandate that I mentioned in and around the expectation about the provision of shelter. If this is a growing social mandate that this is a public service, we're not built to support that and respond to that. We agree and believe that it is, but we're not funded either in the way to support and work to meet that need and that demand. So how can we work together to build the resources and make them available in a radically different way so that we can respond to that need, if that's the consensus of our community? On the state level, I think, again, as there are opportunities locally, there are opportunities at the state level for policy change. There's very, very limited resourcing of emergency shelter in the state of Iowa. Finding new sources, increasing the dedicated funding from the real estate transfer tax that goes into the State Assistance Fund, which is the only resource for state-assisted funding for emergency shelter. I think that there's an opportunity to do that. Now, whether or not there's the public will to do that, given the leadership, I think you've got an uphill climb in front of you there, Janice, that I would fully support. And there's interest from other providers across the state. So that's all that I have right now.
I'd like to join the other council members in thanking you and all the members of Shelter House for the work you do. And thank you for this presentation today, getting the extra background on some of the history, the day-to-day life, and also some of the bigger, medium and bigger size picture. It's super helpful, not just for us on the council, but I think for members of the community who, unless you are there in the moment, you don't understand the complexities of homelessness and people in crisis and how many different ways that can be. And I know today we just barely scratched the surface, I'm sure, of, we didn't talk about what a week was like as opposed to a day. And so we're very aware of that, I think, that as well. One thing, too, I don't know, this is the city. We're in the middle of going through and almost completing our strategic planning process for the next several years. And one thing, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but looking at this kind of thing is actually one of the things we have prioritized over the next couple of years. So absolutely, I think this council is saying that that looking at the ways we can change the model to make it more effective to meet these needs is something that we are interested in, and so much so that we've included that in our strategic plan. So looking forward to that work in the next year or 2, 3, probably ongoing forever, really. One of the things, question I had for you, you had mentioned about managing expectations for this winter. I was wondering if you could get into more specifics about that so we actually know what the expectations, reasonable expectations should be, and what we can expect, that to look like this winter.
Yeah. As I mentioned, we've opened the overflow. That, not ideal that it's available at 10:30 at night. But in order to be able to staff the shelter facility safely, we have to be able to support the 70 guests that are there and then open up the building again for the new 30 additional, up to 30 people that would come in additionally. Working on winter shelter, we're trying to figure out what is the soonest date that we can make winter shelter open and staffed, whether that's starting with just looking at the third shift availability and nights of the week that we can prioritize, but not have that be too disruptive or sporadic of a schedule so that it's confusing for the people in need. And then as we're able to build up to those second shift coverage, it's the second shift that seems to be really lagging for us right now. And I don't know if there's additional information that Rachel or Mark you'd want to add to that. No? Okay.
I was going to say, there's just as that sort of develops, the more that communication coming this way, so we have an idea of that, and when questions are brought to us, then we can have something to respond to with more concrete. Would be a huge help. I mean, that would be something, and I would be happy to do that to help make sure the public is well informed as possible.
I have a few questions. Thank you also for all the work that you've done. And the timeline was really striking. The fact that it's been less than a decade that lowering barriers has been really, I think, in Iowa as a concept, if I understood that correctly, and that in our community, really just in the last 4 years that we've been concertedly looking to shelter people in that way. So I'm just kind of contextualizing my question in that extremely rapid and dramatic change in the services, in sort of the model or the orientation of how you're offering those services. And you said in order for us being the community writ large, not just the city of Iowa City, but in order for us to meet the needs that we would need to invest differently at a different level and in a radically, you just said, different way. Can you give us some sense of what that might look like compared to what we're doing now?
Yeah. If I aim high, it's that we start with a place of what would it take to have a fully publicly funded emergency shelter service available 365 days of the year that meets the needs of the community. Whether that's the combination of the existing 429 shelter and the use and access to what is now a seasonal access, expanding that year-round, but have that be publicly funded. What would it take to get there? If the budget this year, I'm sharing is $1.34 million, with the majority of that being payroll and benefits and those increasing. And again, that does not include any shelter house, admin, or fundraising costs, just purely looking at emergency shelter. If not 100%, then what? It feels like 35% of a publicly funded service that is being recognized as an essential service and a critical component of our community's crisis response system at 35% publicly funded isn't sustainable with that much unknown and capriciousness being injected to the work that has to be done each year to build the 65% gap to cover the cost. Does that make sense? Yeah. The radically different, what are the different tools and approaches that can be used to raise that kind of revenue if there is consensus that there's support to do this? It would take a different funding mechanism entirely.
And you'd mentioned that when the lower barrier shelter started, that you had some good response in terms of how, the emergency room, the jail, that kind of thing, we're seeing that
Yeah.
drop off. And we've seen some of those statistics as far as the cost savings. Can you just talk a little bit about that element as far as where money is being saved if we need to raise money for
you.
these services?
So none of these services have gone away. The cost savings are for the individuals that are utilizing the services or their decreased utilization of those services. Our jail is still open. Our emergency room is still open. These costs did not go away. So there are the sunk costs of those. Those entities are able to, and especially our medical providers, operate, I would argue, more efficiently and effectively as people who are having their basic needs and essential needs met through something like emergency shelter and the ongoing supportive services that we provide. And then for those that we're able to actually house, is they are not seeking care and service within higher levels of care, emergent health care, and then also not exposed to the criminal justice system as they had been before. So the cost savings are from the individuals and their individual cost savings, if that makes sense. We'll say that we know, anecdotally, we've not been able to keep up with the data, but we know anecdotally that shelter and the access to shelter reduces exposure to the criminal justice system, reduces calls for service, reduces charges of loitering and vagrancy, when somebody, not remember the term, when someone is somewhere that they're not supposed to be.
Trespassing.
Thank you. That. Trespassing. We know that those incidences decrease. We know from the first years of winter shelter and working with ambulance providers, they were able to look at the hours of service and see precipitous declines in their calls for service as people were not needing to reach out. They were otherwise provide a safe space to be. Sometimes those are the reasons that people are reaching out to these higher, more emergent care providers. It is that they're just not getting their basic needs met, if that makes sense. Ongoing, we know that folks that we're providing housing for, permanent supportive housing, the care that they're receiving, the integrated clinical services that are on site in our housing units, people are not engaging with our healthcare providers in the same way there. They're not having extended psychiatric inpatient stays, ongoing chronic health care. So we're seeing decreases in their utilization. We've not been able to realize that in increased financial support for that work.
Has one more question.
Absolutely.
So you'd mentioned the part of the problem with staffing up was that there's other publicly funded agencies or entities that maybe can provide higher level of pay, benefits, that kind of thing than you're able to, which just kind of got me thinking about the interplay of all the different organizations involved in helping those who you help. So can you, looking forward and thinking of all these resource needs, can you talk a little bit about opportunities for collaboration and like what we might see in the future for organizations being able to work together in providing all these different arenas of care that you're kind of jumping into?
Well, I think we are coordinating and collaborating in those spaces. There are areas where we end and others pick up, and areas where others end and we have to pick up. Being housing first and low barrier means that if other entities that we're connecting with are not, or as other resources diminish and are not available, for example, as our hospital is overextended, emergency room overextended, we know that they're discharging people to the streets. That's never been written before. Now, literally, the challenge is that they're in such a situation that they're literally stating that. So as we've shifted to housing first and low barrier, it means that more and more we are vetting people in who otherwise would not have been getting care. Other providers along the continuum have not changed and are not expected to change. They're doing what they're intended to do. They're following through on their purpose and mission. But in the change and shift that's happened in your emergency shelter, in your permanent supportive housing provider as low barrier, it means that those folks that were left to be free radicals otherwise on the streets of our community should and can have somewhere to go, but for our capacity. Does that make sense? On the comment also as far as like the ability to further collaborate, I'd say it kind of goes back also to Janice's comment. Some of these other public entities or funded entities along this continuum of crisis response, they're funded different public resources, state resources, federal resources, but our mental health region supports and funds different services. We have the same person who comes through our doors. We're caring for them in a congregate environment. We are not funded. We are not recognized as a provider, and we get caught in the people we serve once they come through our door in a game of tennis where the entity in charge of the funding tries to determine if their crisis was really driven by their homelessness. Because the second it can be determined that their crisis is determined by their homelessness, then they're not eligible for funding. Nothing we do is eligible for the mental health funding in our state. That's a real challenge for us. I was told by someone 2 years ago when the pandemic was really just rolling out, a mental health provider said to me, "Did you know that there are a lot of people who are homeless that are suffering with mental illness?" I did know. I do know. It is incredibly difficult. And I say these things, and we share these concerns, not meant as an indictment to our community or an indictment to our partners. But it's because we need something to be radically different to do the work that we are here and ready and wanting to do, and the work we need to do.
One of the things you had mentioned when you were talking about the history was a shift since the shelter first opened from single individuals to more families. Was kind of curious kind of what that, if you have some sort of a ballpark idea of what sort of that breakdown currently is. And then just also pulling back the lens a little further, how much do you track sort of like the precipitating cause for the crisis? You know, numbers of people who were living somewhere and their apartment got bought out and the rent went up and they were suddenly, through no fault, you know, nothing that they did, joblessness, psychiatric sorts of, untreated psychiatric sorts of things. So I'm curious about those kinds of numbers.
After you answer that, I will go to Mayor Pro Tem Alter.
Oh, I'm going to see if Mark is a lot closer to the data. Would you be okay with responding?
I'll make sure I have the first part of your question.
I can go back and redo that. The first part was just sort of the breakdown between, you know, how many families are finding themselves in a situation where they're looking without housing compared to what it used to be and kind of what it's at now.
Yeah. The breakdown of that, as it used to be, and I say I've been with the organization almost 11 years, and so I certainly can speak for the last 11 years for sure. Typically, what we see is about a third of the people that we serve are families with children, and about 2/3 are single adults, and that's been pretty consistent all the 11 years that I've been there, and which results in about 150 children that we serve. We serve in shelter anywhere between 750 to 900 people every year, and that's pretty consistent. So we haven't necessarily seen. We see that's pretty much the breakdown, I guess. I'll answer that with that. And then part two of your question was what?
Sort of do you keep track of sort of like the trends and precipitating factors for homelessness in our community?
We do as much as we can. And so what we rely on with that, certainly we do intake and exit assessments with folks as they come in as best we can. Certainly all intake and exit stuff as best as we can. But the information that we rely on is self-report. And so it's a challenge. So the information that we're all giving you is self-report, where it would say that, over 50%, 52%, or around 50% every year of folks who come in talk to us about having a disabling condition, whether it's substance use, mental health issues, a chronic health condition, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That is self-report. I can tell you, I've done an assessment with somebody before, where they sat with me and told me that there is basically nothing wrong at all. I don't know why they're there. So finally I ask at the end of this, I ask all the questions and I say, geez, it sounds like things are going really well with you. Why are you up in an emergency shelter right now to come here? And they said, oh, actually, the government's planted a chip in my arm, and I've been running across the country to them, and I ended up here today, but I can only stay 2 days because then that's when they track me. But that person gets marked on our list of data that I'm sharing with you as not having a disability. I would guess, in my professional opinion, that person probably has some sort of untreated mental illness, and they probably have for a long time. So then any number that I could give you is going to be well under probably what the actual accurate information is. So I share it with that. So you're talking about...
Thank you for that explanation too, but thank you.
All right, thanks. We'll go to Mayor Pro Tem Alter.
Thanks. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. So I'm echoing what so many have already said about the just sheer doggedness and determination to really get the community to understand this is an essential service and to expand that service is tremendous, all while dealing with the what is today, what is this hour looking like. So thank you. My question has to do with sort of the short-term scenario of, looking at what do we need to do, how can we manage expectations and actually help perhaps fill in gaps for the winter shelter. And I was curious about what kind of relationships you have with the faith-based communities, since they were such a strong part of your origin stories and for quite some time until 501 was built, right? Actually, I think I got the address wrong. Sorry. Did the shift in the policy and approach to low barrier kind of fundamentally change relationships simply because now you really are talking about needing very specialized kind of certain types of volunteers? Or is it possible that a collaboration, continuing collaboration might be possible to find more people through those avenues?
Thank you. So I would say that the relationship in our connection to faith communities has changed over the course of the pandemic as communication just overall has changed. We still are connected and we rely very heavily on their support. As far as volunteers go, we still encourage and do have and are kind of like bringing back volunteers into our work environment as we've kind of closed out the recovery period to the pandemic and it became more safe to bring the public back in. But with respect to operationalize and staffing the shelter, the evening and overnight shifts, whether it's the winter shelter or the 429 shelter, it is the case that going to a low barrier environment where you do have people who have, we know, untreated mental illness, substance abuse, active substance abuse, we've got single adults, we've got families. Managing the behavior in that environment does require a certain amount of skill. Managing that environment itself requires a certain amount of ability to respond in the moment, de-escalate situations, and the ability just to be present in that space, which isn't always the strength of individuals coming from our general relationships with our faith communities. Our staff have reached out recently to a number of faith communities and talked about the volunteer opportunities and our needs and challenges that we're facing with winter shelter. And after discernment on their part, the individual faith communities have come back and said, this really does not sound something like we can take on with our membership. So I think that that's just the reality. I also would add, and I don't think that Abby Frenzy from the GuideLink Center would challenge, that one would not propose staffing the GuideLink Center with volunteers. And one would not propose staffing mobile crisis with volunteers. I would say that operating an emergency shelter has the chance of creating a more volatile situation because it is a congregate setting. So it's a congregate space where people are living, sleeping, conducting out their lives and not stopping in or not just there briefly for a couple of days, but a number of days. So as one wouldn't propose having volunteers, staff, our other crisis response system providers, I don't know that we should be asked to even really consider that.
I'd like to add just one more piece of perspective, which I know you talked about. I'm not sure if the magnitude of it came across, which is when Shelter House, when you largely put together the funding for Cross Park Place first, it was the first permanent supportive housing in the entire state, and then you managed to do it again for 501, and that shifted a lot. It shifted to permanent help for people. It also shifted a lot of your staffing. But I think it would be useful to just briefly describe how you put together that funding. It actually came together. You brought it together very quickly, if I recall, and the construction was astoundingly fast.
Yep, our general contractor and all the subs did an excellent job of staying on our timeline, especially given the disruptions that we faced because of the pandemic, the supply chain disruptions. We did take a particularly aggressive position on bringing 501 online and making those housing opportunities available. We have witnessed the power, the transformational impact, the life-saving impact of permanent supportive housing for the folks that we've been able to serve through Cross Park. We knew that if we waited until we had fully fundraised and secured all the funding needed to bring another 36 units online, more lives, we'd lose more lives. That's not being melodramatic, it's just the reality. So we took that radical step and we moved forward with that campaign, with that construction, by securing private commercial funding to augment the funds that have been awarded through the Housing Trust Fund of Johnson County, which includes funding from the City of Iowa City and Johnson County, funding from the Iowa Finance Authority. This is National Housing Trust Fund dollars. We were awarded $300,000 in local home funds, $500,000 in additional home funds from the Iowa Finance Authority, but still we had a little over a $2 million gap, which we have financed through commercial lending. And so that is a significant burden for us. It was an understood risk, and calculated, but we understood it to be necessary.
Thanks to all of the staff of the Shelter House that's here today, and all the people that came to support. This is, I think, a moment that I really appreciate, seeing all of the support for the work that the Shelter House does. There's a lot to say here, right? You all went through the history. I get it. It's very nice to see, as Councilor Berg has laid out, like this is a short period of time with a lot of changes. And the low barrier shelter, I was happy to hear that it was illustrated that is more the focus on the behavior and not the chemistry that's within someone. So I appreciated hearing that. And there's so much to talk about here, but I wanted to get to back to the immediate need. There's been a lot of conversation here, and I'm not going to repeat a lot of things. As I see, you talked about the short term and how do we manage the expectations. We all know that, as it was mentioned, people can die in the winter. So that's not being melodramatic, that's a fact. I heard that there was 6% or 16% of children that was a part of the winter shelter, if I understood correctly.
Part of all shelter.
Part of all shelters, yeah. And I'm sure you all prioritize children where you can so that they're not left out in the cold. Mm-hmm. But when I hear that 10:30 p.m., the shelter being opened at night, very appreciative for that. I understand the logic behind it. But that is pretty late for people to find shelter. So when I think about the social mandate that you mentioned, which is within the long term, we have this immediate need that, while I understand, the skillful staff that is required for, the services that are provided, I also think that potentially this community has, or I don't think that this is all the shelter house problem, for one. I think it's been mentioned that unhoused is across the nation. I mean, it's a big deal. Iowa City is a melting pot for the homeless people within our county. And even throughout the state, on some levels where people come here because it's available. The services are here. So when I think about at least the short-term need of the winter shelter, I put it out there that maybe this is something that really needs to have a conversation amongst the community members that want to be a part of the conversation. I really appreciate the work of the shelter house, but I think it's a bigger conversation that could be had. When I do think about the expert, services of staff that are trained, at least my mind goes to imagining there could be a space for volunteers. And where it's not fully volunteer, because you have to always have some staff that are paid, that are fully trained. But I think about, some of the hospice support staff. They're hospice specialized staff, but there's volunteers that come in. They've never really dealt with this before. Maybe there's a little training, but it's hard work. So where my mind goes to is still trying to figure out, how do we get the short-term immediate need for the shelter up and running? Because all of us in this room, as you mentioned, we're all about housing, and we believe it's a human right.
Yeah. So thank you, and thank you for that support. I would say one thing that could be done is to ensure that my organization has the ability to pay people commensurate with the work that they're doing and consistent with other publicly funded crisis response providers. When my staff can walk down the street and get paid $5 to $7 more an hour, they will leave. It's a reasonable thing to do and go to an environment that is relatively more manageable and do that. And then it is a zero-sum game right now with respect to hiring people on. I agree with you that having volunteers in the work environment is a possibility, but not if they're the only person on shift.
No.
And that's what we're looking at right now. We need that first lead person on shift before we can talk about bringing other people in to support their work in those volunteer opportunities. And I do just need to add, because this is on the public record, that people are not coming to our community because of the services that exist here that are so profoundly different, or in excess, the perception that there's more services here than there are other places. People do come here because we have the University of Iowa hospitals and clinics, because we have employment opportunities, because we have good schools, because we have a vibrant community, because we are located in proximity and adjacent to two major interstates. These are the drivers that pull people here, not your social service providers. And I just don't want people to conflate those things.
Sure. I just know that we have a lot of people coming to Iowa City and the surrounding areas, and so I appreciate that. So I think, at least for me, to wrap up my comments, what I would suggest is, and it's unfortunate that we didn't have the Johnson County joint entities, that's all the municipalities, here to hear this presentation, because I feel like all of these communities could benefit from this conversation. The school district, all of your cities that are a part of that, because Johnson County, there are 11 cities
Yes.
within the county, and so I think we all would have benefited from hearing this. And I encourage you all to continue to tell your story. I would just put it out there that I strongly suggest that there is some type of a community opportunity, whether that is I'm not, again, I think the shelter house, this isn't saying that you all aren't doing, you're doing an excellent job, by the way. Your staff, very moved by the stories. Thank you for coming and sharing that. And I hear the personal sacrifice that you all are making, and the community appreciates that. But I don't want this to be a reflection of within my comments that the shelter house isn't doing enough, because that's not the case. You all have provided something in this community. You're the only ones, on some level when it comes down to homelessness. And so certainly there's individuals that are taking in people in their homes and helping individuals that are unhoused for some time. But as an organization, you all are the ones that we look towards, and we do appreciate that. This is a big, big thing, and I just don't know that the shelter house has to bear this burden alone. We have so many other providers that might come to the table and offer up some solutions that might just fit the lock.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
I guess my closing comment, aside from a really heartfelt thanks, is that I think we are at a crossroads, and I think the time has come to change the paradigm. And the question is, will we as elected officials, not just in the city, but in the county and the cities, actually step up to the plate?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. This is a big topic. I don't know that we'll ever be able to stop it, but we really appreciate everyone for being here, everyone from the shelter house and everyone that's here to support and stand in and say that housing is a human right. And as a community, we do need to figure it out. So thanks to the shelter house for their presentation today. We're going to continue with our agenda. And the next agenda item is clarification of agenda items. How do I get Mayor Pro Tem?
I am good.
Okay. You'll have to jump in. I can't see your hand anymore. All right. We will move on to information packet discussion. We'll start with November 3rd. And in that information packet, IP2, there's a memo about USG us having a joint meeting with please come up. Yes. We're going to welcome Keaton, yes, at this time.
Hi, Council. So the memo's about setting up a meeting, joint session. If you remember, it was held in 2020 with City Council, undergraduate student government, and graduate student government in the ballroom at the Iowa Memorial Union. And we would like to bring that back this year and have a date set up sometime in the spring. So if we could explore the possibility of having that sometime.
I think that's a great idea. One suggestion I would make is I think it would be beneficial to include COGS into that meeting.
Okay.
So just another group of representation for our graduate students. So.
Councillor Thomas and I, who's not present today, but we were both at that meeting that was mentioned, and I have to say it was just such a good experience to hear what was on the minds of these student leaders. I was very impressed. They spoke from their hearts and their minds and made very good points. And so I would stress I'm very much in favor of meeting, and spring would be great, that we all as council members listen to what they're saying, really listen to what they're saying, and I think that would be very beneficial to us to hear what they have to say.
There were some great things that came out of that meeting as well. I was a part of that meeting in, was it 2019? Or I don't,
I think it was,
I mean, Laura and I were there as well for the last one, so.
Okay.
It
would have been
Yeah.
was
2020.
early 2020.
2020? Okay, it was 2020. Yes, so we did have staff there. We can figure out internally which of our staff will be present, but is there a date that that has been thrown around by you all that we can consider?
There hasn't been a date. We've been aiming for sometime in the spring. In 2020, it was held in February, but we'd like kind of a later date in the spring, maybe like
Sure.
March, April. That'd be good.
Yeah. I don't know if there's, if I remember correctly, it was on maybe a Wednesday or a Thursday evening.
It was held on a Tuesday, I believe.
Okay.
Tuesday at 7, but we
Okay.
can for sure work the date regardless.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think getting through the meat of our budget before then would be great. So that fits with the timing that you're talking about.
So March or April. Yep.
Great. That
Yeah.
works great. Thank you.
All right. And then I just want to make sure with the council, is there any day of the week that they should avoid? I would say Monday and Fridays maybe, but at least a Friday, avoid a Friday. But we would be open to what works for the students, unless there's a day of the week that people
I'm willing
say-
to bet most college students would be okay avoiding Friday evenings for a meeting with city officials. Just
Okay.
call it a hunch.
Yes. Yeah. And then you know when our meetings are, so, all right.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I just want to clarify, so we have understanding, you just want USG to propose a date to you, and then the council will pick liaisons to attend, or are you wanting to attend with the majority of the council present?
So we attended with all of the
I think
council
it's
present.
beneficial for
So an
all of
actual
us.
joint
meeting, yeah.
meeting?
Yes.
Should we target an off Tuesday? Is that,
Yes.
Yeah.
try to make this a little
Sounds
simpler?
good.
I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
Yes.
We'll work with you to find a Tuesday night that's a non-council meeting that we can
All right.
schedule with you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other items from November 3rd info packet? Hearing none, we're going to go to November 10th info packet.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to highlight a couple things on IP5. And actually, it's probably fitting, just we were talking about UISG, that's, IP5 is the, looking at some of our legislative priorities. And mostly I just wanted to highlight a couple of things I was pleased to see in that list. One of them being the city joining our voice to UISG's rental property move-in checklist and asking for that change in Des Moines. Also, thank you to, I'm grateful to see, and I think this, as we consider this our next meeting, the support for the manufactured housing residents' rights and adding our city's voice to those voices was something I think is wonderful to see there, and I think completely appropriate, especially given our discussion for the first hour and a half of this meeting tonight. Just really underscores that. So I'll leave off with that.
If I could just hop in real fast, I just wanted to sorry, Sean, I saw you looking up into the air as I was talking. I just wanted to echo what you were saying, Sean, and to thank everyone who put together the legislative priorities. They seem so commonsensical, and I just very much appreciate the efforts that to try to bring state and city together to help make our communities better. So we'll see what happens, but this was an incredibly impressive list of what I see as very commonsensical, beneficial measures that really have no downside as far as the state is concerned. So thank you very much for that.
This one's excuse me, a little hard for me to talk about, but under IP3, the pending work session topics, and I realize it's already an extensive list with very pertinent topics, but in light of recent incidents in the community, I believe that the mental health and well-being of all the persons goes beyond posting the 988 number, which I thank you and the police department for doing what you have to do that and make that known, and that's a start. But it goes much deeper than that, and I've been in contact with some local mental health practitioners who are more than willing to do a presentation to us, and especially after hearing what we've heard about the homeless folks. I they would come and talk to us regarding mental health and perhaps suicide prevention and signs to recognize and those kinds of things. 'Cause, so I would propose that we add that as a work session topic, and the sooner the better. I don't know if there are 3 other council members that would agree with me on that. Okay. I see Janice is nodding and Laura and,
Yeah.
Megan says yes also.
okay.
Great.
Thank you, Megan.
Do you want to target a date or just place that on the list of future work sessions?
So it sounds like we need to just prioritize it
Prioritize it on the list.
on
Yeah.
as soon as we can. Yes.
If you've got some already scheduled, Jeff, I can understand that, but to get it in there as soon as we can, before even February.
Yeah.
Because the winter months, I think, seem to be hard times for most folks, and hearing from the homeless shelter folks, that is a rough time for people.
And are you looking for a presentation on the 988 and related crisis services, or is this bigger than community and you want someone from the mental health region or a local provider, all of the above?
Kind of all of the above. Like I said, I've been in contact with some folks that particularly do suicide prevention, and they were more than willing to come. So kind of the mental health, the state of the city, what they see as the state of the mental health in our community, and what we as council members could do, what the community can do to recognize signs and to help folks just for their well-being.
I wanted to go back briefly to the legislative priorities and just point out the one of the climate action pieces that would make a lot of sense, which is changing the legislative structure so that you could allow investor-owned utilities to implement the community solar, which could make a big difference for some, not just in this community, but many others.
All right, any other items? We're going to get an update from USG. So we're going to welcome Keaton and Noah.
Good evening, Council. All right, so first up, we have the Board of Regents meeting. This past week, we had several executive cabinet members attend a meeting with the Board of Regents in Council Bluffs. During the meeting, they talked about campus safety matters and safety matters at all levels. And this also came with an approval for the West Campus recreation fields being improved for $5.8 million deal to renovate the university's West Campus recreation fields. The renovation is expected to take place hopefully by spring 2023.
And then we also have the University of Iowa Rape Victim Advocacy Program create a support group to help people by using art, and it's called the Healing Through Art. And the support group teaches coping and healing methods to those experiencing difficulty through art. Thank you.
Thank you both. Council updates on assigned boards, commissions, and committees.
Well, there was an ICAD meeting last Friday, sort of moving forward with discussions on this proposed merger with the business council here. I always forget what their name is.
Partnership.
Business partnership, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Alter, any updates? Hearing none, we will adjourn until 6 p.m. All right, good evening, everyone. It is 6 p.m. on November 15th, 2022, and I'm going to call this meeting to order for the City of Iowa City. And roll call, please.
Alter,
Here.
Burgess.
Here.
Harmson,
Here.
Taylor,
Here.
Teague,
Here.
Thomas, Weiner.
Here.
All right. And we didn't hear Mayor Alter.
Yes.
Did-
Yes,
oh, it's-
yes, she did.
Okay, great. Just wanted to make sure people knew that Mayor Alter, Mayor Pro Tem Alter, is joining us virtually today, and Councilor John Thomas will not be with us. All right, we're going to move on to item number 2, proclamations 2A, the Human Rights Day, and this is going to be read by Councilor Burgess.
Whereas on December 10th, 1948, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly. And whereas the Universal Declaration of Human Rights Day proclaims the inalienable rights which everyone is inherently entitled to as a human being, regardless of race, color, religion, sex, language, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status. And whereas at the end of 2021, the total number of people worldwide who were forced to flee their homes due to conflicts, violence, fear of persecution, and human rights violations was 89.3 million. And whereas if ongoing conflicts remain unresolved and the risk of new ones erupting are not reined in, one aspect that will define the 21st century will be the continuously growing numbers of people forced to flee and the increasingly dire options available to them. And whereas the number of refugees and forcibly displaced people has swelled to nearly 100 million worldwide, mostly women and children. The United Nations High Commission for Refugees works every day to aid these victims of war, famine, and depression. And whereas the Johnson County United Nations Association, the city's Office of Equity and Human Rights, the Iowa City Public Library, and the Refugee and Immigrant Association will observe Human Rights Day on Tuesday, December 6th at 7 p.m. in Meeting Room A of the Iowa City Public Library with a panel of refugees now living in Iowa and a representative of UNHCR to discuss refugee rights and how UNHCR helps to protect those rights. Now I, on behalf of Bruce Teague, Mayor of Iowa City, do hereby proclaim December 10th, 2022 to be Human Rights Day in Iowa City and encourage community members to celebrate universal human rights and promote the value of human rights in our city and state in order to create awareness, education, and an environment of respect and connection for all community members. And to accept this proclamation is the president of the Johnson County chapter of the United Nations Association, Barbara Eckstein.
And we welcome you to give some words. Yep.
Well, I want to say again how grateful I am to the city for partnering with us again on an event. We appreciate the public library support and always the support of the city's Equity and Human Rights Commission.
Thank you. 2B is Transgender Day of Remembrance, and this will be read by Councilor Weiner.
So I actually asked to read this because it seems of particular importance given some of the hostility at the state level right now. So whereas Transgender Day of Remembrance is an annual observance on November 20th that honors the memory of the transgender people whose lives were lost in acts of anti-transgender violence. And whereas in 1999, Transgender Day of Remembrance was founded in order to memorialize the murder of Rita Hester, a transgender woman. And whereas the Human Rights Campaign tracks annual statistics of violence against people in the transgender community. The latest statistics currently available for 2022 report over 30 transgender or gender nonconforming people fatally shot or killed by other violent means in the U.S. A disproportionately high number of victims are Black and Latinx transgender women. And whereas Transgender Day of Remembrance is an opportunity to look forward to the future and recommit to ending discrimination and transphobia by amplifying the visibility and voices of the transgender community. And whereas you can commemorate Transgender Day of Remembrance by attending and/or organizing a vigil on November 20th to honor all those transgender people whose lives were lost to anti-transgender violence and learn about the violence affecting the transgender community. Now, therefore, I, Janice Weiner, on behalf of Bruce Teague, Mayor of Iowa City, do hereby proclaim November 20th, 2022 to be Transgender Day of Remembrance in Iowa City. The Transgender Pride flag will be hung at City Hall from Wednesday, November 16th through Monday, November 21st. And accepting this proclamation will be Human Rights Commissioner Doug Kolash.
Thank you. My name is Doug Kolash. I'm in the Human Rights Commission, pronouns he, him. And on behalf of the Iowa City Human Rights Commission, I accept this proclamation and wish to extend our sincere gratitude to City Council for recognizing the Transgender Day of Remembrance. On November 20th, we mourn the transgender Americans we lost this year, as well as the countless other transgender people around the world, disproportionately Black and brown transgender women and girls, as the result of brutal violence, discrimination, and harassment. These victims, like all of us, are loving partners, family members, friends, and community members. They worked, they went to school, they attended houses of worship. They were real people, people who did not deserve to have their lives taken from them. We have seen a significant increase in anti-trans laws and rhetoric from political leaders across the country, and Iowa is not immune to this tragic and despicable wave of hatred. These so-called leaders have taken aim at transgender children, a group that is already marginalized, a group that is already struggling. Transgender children and LGBT children as a group are much more likely to commit suicide than their peers. The American Academy of Pediatrics reports that more than half of transgender male teens attempt suicide in their lifetime, while 1 in 3 transgender female teens said they had attempted suicide. These are students who are struggling to find a place to belong in their school, and instead of being supported and allowed to participate freely, they've been told they are not welcome or worthy of playing sports with their peers. The anti-trans rhetoric has pervaded the public discourse, and it seeks to dehumanize and demonize our transgender friends and neighbors. The words and attitudes of political leaders have the chilling effect of fomenting and encouraging violence against transgender members of our community. When members of the LGBTQ community are called groomers or pedophiles or any number of homophobic and transphobic slurs, it gives credence to hatred and lights the fuse of violence. In the recent election cycle, we have even seen examples of this dangerous speech in our own community of Iowa City. Therefore, I once again wish to thank the members of the City Council for issuing this proclamation in remembrance of the victims of transgender violence. Let it be clear that in Iowa City, we acknowledge and affirm this immutable truth, that trans men are men, transgender women are women, and that all humans have the right to freedom, justice, and joy. Thank you.
Thank you. Two C is USS Iowa SSN 797 Submarine Day, and this proclamation will be read by Councilor Taylor.
Whereas the state of Iowa has a rich history of supporting the U.S. Armed Forces, and the residents of Iowa have answered the call to serve our nation since 1846, and whereas the U.S. Navy has designated the 24th ship of the Virginia-class attack submarine to be named USS Iowa SSN 797. And whereas this warship will continue to build upon the proud legacy of the rich history of the previous 3 warships named Iowa, BB-4, BB-53, and most recently BB-61, the Big Stick. And whereas USS Iowa SSN 797 is currently under construction in Groton, Connecticut, with an estimated commissioning date of summer of 2023. And whereas the USS Iowa will be the first nuclear-powered submarine purposefully built to accommodate both female enlisted and officer crew members. And whereas this warship will be in service for over 30 years, serving our country and representing the great state of Iowa. And whereas the commissioning committee of the USS Iowa seeks to bring recognition to the crew and the vessel and strive to establish a connection between the vessel and the residents of Iowa. Now, therefore, I, Pauline Taylor, on behalf of Bruce Teague, Mayor of Iowa City, do hereby proclaim November 15th, 2022, to be USS Iowa SSN 797 Submarine Day. And we very proudly say accepting is United States Navy veteran Caleb Schneider. Caleb, come up.
First of all, I'd like to thank you all, Mayor Teague, especially. This means a lot to me as an Iowa City native. Grew up here pretty much my whole life until I left for the Navy back in 2012. Moved back to the state last year with my family and live just down the road now in Tiffin. So thank you all. Being a submarine veteran with Veterans Day just behind us, this is a special moment. And with the USS Iowa being the first submarine named after our state, and as was stated, the fourth naval vessel named after our state, I think this is a very unique thing for us. I think it's safe to say that this is the first and last submarine that we will see named after our state, for our lives at least. And I think it really represents Iowa well by they really had to do some re-engineering of the ship to accommodate the male and female crews for both officer and enlisted crew members. So I think that really represents our state, and I'm proud to be an executive director of the commissioning committee. So thank you very much, and have a great night.
Thank you. We will move on to items 3 through 7, which is our consent agenda. Could I get a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved. Weiner.
Second, Taylor.
All right, moved by Weiner, seconded by Taylor. Anyone from the public like to discuss this topic? Please step up to the podium. If you are online, please raise your hand and I'll acknowledge you. Seeing no one, council discussion.
I just very quickly, like to comment on 6H, the Willow Creek stabilization, since that's in my neighborhood there. Benton Street is a very busy street and walkway, and the creek is very visible from the street and the walkway. So I've been watching the progress of this stabilization, and I have to admit the erosion had been getting really bad along there, and tree stumps and just wasting away. And so I was very impressed, and I'm pleased with the results.
And I just wanted to refer to item 6B, which is the formal appointment of our undergraduate student government liaisons, who really always bring tremendous value added and connect this community, the sort of town and gown, the town with the university community.
Great. Any other comments? Roll call, please.
Harmson?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Teague?
Yes.
Weiner?
Yes.
Alter?
Yes, sorry.
That's all right. Burgess?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0. Item number 8 is community comment. This is an opportunity for anyone to speak on an item that is not on our agenda. If you are present, we ask that you step to the podium. There is a sign-in sheet at the podium, and there are also stickers in the back of the room. For anyone online that wishes to comment, please raise your hand and I'll acknowledge you. Seeing no one, we're going to move on. Oh, sorry. There is a hand raised online. Welcome, F.J. Piper. Please state your name and the city you're from.
Hi, my name's Felicia Pieper. I live in Iowa City.
Welcome.
Thank you. I wanted to speak about our homelessness services in the city of Iowa City, or lack thereof. I'm increasingly concerned that I've still not heard about a winter shelter being open now that there's snow on the ground. I would also like to just speak a little bit more on one story of one person who is experiencing homelessness, who has been in the shelter house system now for several months through multiple programs and not receiving the services that are described. There is a lack of accountability and transparency around our homelessness services, and I would like to know what the city is doing to fill the gaps for our neighbors and residents that need those services and they're not getting them. I'd like to speak more on one person's story who started off by reaching out to Shelter House for eviction prevention services, moved through that process really by herself without receiving those services. She was then transitioned into the rapid rehousing services and the permanent housing services. This has been going on for several weeks, and while I understand the barriers to receiving these services and the fact that they are I guess just like not readily accessible. Like I am sympathetic to that there are rules to follow. But I think that the way that staff will are not accountable to making sure that they're being in contact with the people that they are serving. I find this problematic for many reasons, but one reason being that our homeless neighbors are some of the most vulnerable neighbors, and that it seems like someone needs an advocate, multiple advocates, to even be able to receive the services that are offered through Shelter House. I would like to see the city make tangible steps to creating accountability processes, and also transparency among those services. Once again, considering that our unhoused neighbors are some of the most vulnerable, how are we ensuring that those folks are getting connected and being treated with dignity? And I would like the city to take some ownership over this and make sure that the accountability is there. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, anyone else? Seeing no one, we're going to move on to item number 9, which is planning and zoning matters. 9A, rezoning 937 East Davenport Street. Ordinance rezoning property located at 937 East Davenport Street from medium-density single-family residential zone to medium-density single-family residential zone with a historic district overlay, and this is second consideration, and staff is requesting expedited action.
I move that the rule requiring that ordinances must be considered and voted on for passage at 2 council meetings prior to the meeting at which it is to be finally passed be suspended, that the second consideration and vote be waived, and that the ordinance be voted on for final passage at this time.
Second.
Moved by Weiner, seconded by Taylor. Anyone from the public like to discuss this topic? If so, please step forward or raise your hand online. Council discussion?
I'm very much in favor of this, so pleased to see this, and I applaud the owners of this property for seeing the historical value of this home and wanting to preserve it. It's not a style we see these days, obviously, but it reminds me of the tiny homes that I envision for this city, so I'm very much in favor of this.
It's always good to see the owners, as you mentioned, just be on board with this, because sometimes that's not the situation, which we respect anyone's opinion and choice, but this is a great opportunity, and I'm excited to see this. Roll call, please.
Taylor?
Yes.
Teague?
Yes.
Weiner?
Yes.
Alter?
Yes.
Burgess?
Yes.
Harmson?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0. Could I get a motion to pass and adopt?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Weiner, seconded by Taylor. Roll call, please.
Teague?
Yes.
Weiner?
Yes.
Alter?
Yes.
Burgess?
Yes.
Harmson.
Yes.
Taylor.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0. Item 10 is sidewalk cafes expand locations. Ordinance amending Title 10 entitled Public Ways and Property, Chapter 3 entitled Commercial Use of Sidewalks to allow sidewalk cafes outside of the downtown and riverside crossings. Could I get a motion to give first consideration?
So moved, Burgess.
Second, Weiner.
All right, we're going to welcome Rachel.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. So currently, the sidewalk cafes are only allowed in the downtown and riverfront crossings zones. So this ordinance amendment would allow sidewalk cafes without a liquor license to operate outside of those districts. The cafes would be required to still abide by our sidewalk cafe ordinance and policy, as well as any other additional restrictions that staff or the city manager may see fit. So example, if you have a coffee shop operating in maybe a more residential neighborhood, maybe the hours of operation need to be reduced, that kind of thing. So as you'll recall at your September 6th work session, you discussed several other recommended changes to our sidewalk cafe program. This is the only one that requires an ordinance change, so that first reading is before you now. Our sidewalk cafe program is governed by both ordinance and policy, so the other recommendations will be brought to you as a policy amendment at your next meeting on December 6th.
Great. Any questions for Rachel? Thank you. Anyone from the public like to discuss this topic? If so, please come forth. There is no one online presently. Seeing no one, council discussion. Roll call, please.
Weiner.
Yes.
Alter.
Yes.
Burgess.
Yes.
Harmson.
Yes.
Taylor.
Yes.
Teague.
Yes. Motion passes 6-0. Item number 11 is land acknowledgement statement. Resolution adopting a land acknowledgement recognizing indigenous peoples and their traditional territories on which we live. Could I get a motion to approve?
So moved. Alter.
Second, Burgess.
Anyone from the public like to discuss this topic? Seeing no one, council discussion.
The first few years of my life, I lived in a small town in Wyoming where indigenous people lived, worked, and were all around us. And they were even celebrated on several times throughout the year. So when my family moved to Iowa, which had cities, counties, and rivers with Native American names, I was surprised that there was hardly any mention of their heritage. In fact, they lived on reservations and were totally separate from most of us. So thank you, Councilor Weiner, for putting this before us to recognize the contributions made to our land by the indigenous people.
Thank you. It had been recommended by at least two of our commissions that we produce a land acknowledgement statement, drew on basically material that was already present at the university from the Native American Council as well as the law school. It just seemed to me, as you said, that it was long past time that we honor those on whose land we live and thrive, that it's an essential part of our history. And I think that if we've learned anything over the past few years, that it should be that we must learn from, accept, and acknowledge our past and allow it to inform our present and our future.
Roll call, please.
Weiner.
Yes.
Alter.
Yes.
Burgess.
Yes.
Harmson.
Yes.
Taylor.
Yes.
Teague.
Yes. Motion passes 6-0. Item number 12 is filling council vacancy by special election. Resolution setting the special election to fill the council vacancy created by Janice Weiner's resignation. Could I get a motion to approve, please?
So moved, Burgess.
Second,
Harmson.
Alter.
All right. Moved by Burgess, seconded by Alter. She was louder than you. And we're going to welcome our city attorney, Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So hopefully you've all had a chance to review the staff memo that came out on this topic. As you will recall, there are two methods by which you'll need to fill the council vacancy that'll be created upon Councilor Weiner's resignation, the effective date for which is the end of this calendar year. The first is to appoint a replacement. The second is to call a special election to elect a replacement for Councilor Weiner. As a result, there are two competing resolutions on your agenda tonight. They are numbered items 12 and 13, respectively. One says that you'll choose to fill the vacancy via an appointment. The other says you choose to fill it by special election. So obviously you will need to, or you will want to vote in favor of one and to reject the other. This is a zero-sum game. Only one of those can be the winner. As I've shared with Councilor Weiner and the rest of you, because Councilor Weiner remains a seated member of council through the end of this calendar year and has no legal conflict from participating in these discussions, she's free to take part in this discussion and vote, as she does with any and all other votes until the effective date of her resignation at the end of this year. To be clear, while Councilor Weiner may take part in determining the method by which this council will decide how to fill that vacancy, because this council cannot appoint a replacement if council decides to appoint until the vacancy actually occurs, she will not be in a position to vote for the specific individual who will fill her shoes. So your task tonight is merely to determine how you wish to fill the vacancy by special election or by appointment. Obviously, I'm happy here to answer your questions as they relate to election costs or how we did it last time, any other questions that you can think of, at least to the best of my ability, given how rarely this happens.
Eric, this is Megan. I have a question, and it may sound naive. Even though we have two separate agenda items, we can discuss them as, sort of in play with one another in order to be able to make a decision, correct? We don't have to sort of go through the first agenda item. I want to make sure that we're not hamstringing ourselves. We'll be able to discuss both the pros and the cons of appointment and special election at the same time, correct? Even though we just end up with one decision.
Right.
Correct?
A fair question, and you're absolutely right. You can have a full-fledged discussion for the first agenda item, and they come in order, and I should be clear, no particular order. The order is number 12, is by special election. So yes, you as a council should have a full discussion about whether you wish to have special election or appointment, and then vote on this, and then vote on the second one. And as I said, hopefully one of those will pass and the other does not.
Thank you.
All right, council discussion.
Personally, I'm not in favor of having a special election to fill the vacancy. I think that comes from, thank you, Eric, you did share some of the statistics on the cost. Thanks also to the auditor's office, but it's a hefty price tag and a lot of time and a lot of staff effort, and I just would say no to special election.
When we first started, sorry, Megan, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, you go ahead, Laura.
I was just going to reflect on when we first knew this would be likely, I guess, when Janice announced her candidacy. At the time, I was very much like, Iowa City has no option but an election, right? Like, there's no way that Iowa City would stand for appointment of a city councilor. And then I went and looked at saw what Coralville did, for one, but also knowing that the school district made an appointment, and went and looked up some statistics on special city council elections in Johnson County in the last several years. So I believe the last Iowa City one was 2018. Is that right, Eric?
That's correct.
And so at that point, 9% of our registered voters participated in that election. And in 2019, the next year in North Liberty, they had a special city council election that was 7% of the registered voters. 2020 in Coralville was better, 13.8% of the registered voters. Tiffin in 2020 had a special city council election, 4.48% of the registered voters. And just this year in North Liberty, they had a special city council election with 1.9% of the registered voters participating. So all of those statistics are just to say not very many people participate. And we know that the timeline for a special election would be very short, and that a campaign, all of us up here have gone through a campaign of one type or another, takes a lot of effort, a lot of energy. It can take a lot of money, a lot of stress. And from an equity standpoint, I think a low barrier application that is open to everyone, with us having the opportunity to speak with individuals who would be interested, is actually a better process for making it open to those who might be wanting and capable of serving than having a very, very low turnout, short time frame special election. So I've moved, in my opinion, to favoring appointment.
I think this is one that I've really still kind of struggle with, because on principle, I think, I'm totally in favor of having the people have a voice in this decision and having, help with other of these short-term campaigns. I like how it can opens things up a little bit more to somebody out there who might be able to field a campaign and can jump in. And this body here has benefited from the outcomes of special elections, and we've had some good results with that. I don't feel particularly a lot of problem with the financial cost of a campaign, because I think just democracy is worth it. All of those things said, I definitely can see the point of this is only going to be a year term versus a longer period of time. If we do run an election, special election, quite probably this new person wouldn't be on until we are through or almost through the budget process, which was one of the things that I was originally concerned about. We're talking about the amount of money to run an election versus the amount of the budget that we'll make decisions on, but somebody who comes in through a special election wouldn't really be part of that, wouldn't be here in time for that process. So I'm still waffling back and forth a little bit on this, but those are the things that I've been sort of weighing out in my head as I do so.
Well, it may seem a little bit odd for me to speak on this. That I guess the thing that I've been thinking about is you referred to democracy, and I've ended up wondering. I mean, I remember when Councilor Burgess and I were first elected, the press came to us, and one of the things I said, it's really great, but I really wish we had more than 15 or 16% turnout or whatever it was. We need more. This local government affects you, and it would be really helpful if more people would turn out to vote. And so when I look at the possibility of a special election and really low turnout, it seems almost anti-democratic, and that's sort of my concern.
Well, and certainly I can see that in the time of year we're discussing too.
Mayor Pro Tem Alter.
Yeah, I'm very much like Councilor Burgess in that I started off thinking, and you and I have talked about it, Mayor, about well, of course, Iowa City just does special elections, but I too started to think about it, and there are several things that just sway me towards an appointment. For one, it's not even a year's appointment by the time the person comes on. It's roughly 9 months. Coralville, Iowa City School District, and the League of Cities the former two conducted appointments, and then the League of Cities in the memo that we saw from Eric shows that that's sort of the majority way that many cities have conducted their business as well, for what that's worth. Sean, you talked about the timing of it, as well as others. I think February that's a brutal time of year for people to get out. And we have just come off of a grueling midterm cycle, and I think that people are very tired. I think that too is going to depress turnout. Ultimately, what sways me the most is that if, in fact, we go the route of an appointment, the public can speak and say that they want a special election. They just have to petition it. So it's not that we're cutting out the possibility of one. If people feel very strongly otherwise, the people can speak. And I think that's the great thing about the way that this has been written. So I feel okay with putting forth an appointment an RFP, if you will, for people to apply. I very much would like to be able to talk with candidates as well, but that's kind of my thinking and where I'm leaning at this point.
So I appreciate all of the comments so far about do we do special election, do we appoint, just like everyone. I've kind of gone through that process of this is Iowa City. They will never allow a special election. They will never allow an appointment. And so I started there, and where we have to go to a special election. And as things began to unfold, many of the things that people processed here, I did determine that an appointment would be in the best interest of the city. I've had many conversations with people in the community saying, "Hey, what are your thoughts? What are you thinking here?" And surprisingly, some of the political faces of those that are very prevalent when it comes down to elections, many of them kind of said, I can be open to either, which was a little surprising. The timeline that many of you talked about is going to be short if we go to a special election. We're looking at not appointing someone, not having someone in that seat for some time, and then if we do an appointment, we'll have to talk about when do we want to end the application process. I'm looking at how we typically do our commissions. So like vacancies new on our agenda for today. That application closes Tuesday, January 3rd. And so I would say that we would have an application process that would end no earlier than January 3rd would be my proposal. And then if we are to go also with that appointment route, the question would be what does that application look like for those that are interested? And also, how do we make sure that, as Councilor Burgess talked about, keeping the barriers low, more of a, how do we make sure that we ensure that we're asking, some pertinent questions, but also making sure that it's equitable to everyone in the community that is interested in this opportunity. So I will be supporting the appointment route, and then I think at some point we have to have a little more of the logistical conversations about how do we make that happen. Any other comments on this one?
Actually, I was going to say, with that approach, do we have an idea for how long it would take to put out an actual, would that be something we'd prepare and then vote on the announcement, the job posting, if you will, at our next meeting? And then can we even do that while there's still a vacancy? When can we actually start that process?
Oh, yeah, we can start the process now. And so if you want to spend some time or if you want to give some guidance to staff and we can present a draft, perhaps for your December 6th meeting, that'd be fine. Based on your remaining meeting schedule for this year, I think it would probably be, if council wants to provide input or to approve the application form or any other part of the application process, we would probably need to have that from you by December 6th, or to have you vote on it on December 6th.
I appreciated the application forms that you shared with us that Coralville utilized in the school district, and of course there are a lot of things that would need to be tweaked a bit, but otherwise the format was what I think we could utilize and would be helpful.
And would we also have to set up now or decide when we finally make this decision on the timing for, are we going to set up a process that involves a two-stage application, then interviews, and then time frame for that? I'm just wondering about some of those logistics that the mayor was talking about, just what that might look like. I think some of this was in the memo, but I don't know if all of it was.
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming that, I mean, I'm hearing the consensus is to appoint, and if that's the case and you want to decide on an application process, that's the form, that's the process itself. That is, would you folks want interviews? Would you just be doing it based on, what you see in the application and or, letters of reference, whatever you're interested in as a council? And then it would, again, be best if we nail that all down by December 6th. So if it's up to you, if you want to have some discussion about kind of your desires in that regard tonight, that would give staff some direction. And again, we can present something to you that you can react to. And then we can, make changes on the fly at the meeting on the 6th, if that's your, if you want to make any. But then we'd have the process nailed down, and then the city clerk and I can, make sure we get the notices published and so forth, consistent with the state law and all the other requirements that are there at state code.
I think the examples that you gave us were really good at other cities and their application. And then we already have an application process that we use for our commissions. And so I would, propose that we either look at that right now in real time, look at our current commission application, and maybe decipher what we don't think is necessary for a council appointment. We know that the gender requirement is a state requirement for people to, answer that. And so I think we can remove things that are not, that aren't required.
To be clear, Mayor, the gender balance and so forth is for board and commissioners. Maybe that's what you're saying already.
Yes,
That would not be
yes.
required. Yeah.
No, that would not be required,
Yeah.
but it is required for our commission applications. And so, and then if that is the case, if we want to, go that route, at starting, there. When I look at the city of Coralville's, the information that they ask is what we ask for the most part within our commissioners. Our application is just very long because we have we spell out a few things, an explanation of like, tell us if you're on a city commission before, that type of stuff. So, and maybe we don't want to know that information unless they naturally say that they've been on a, like for instance, Coralville, talks about experience and or activities which you feel qualify you for the city council. So maybe there are some tweaks that we can make, somewhat on the fly, and we can use what we already have as a standard. And then the question would be, is if we do make this determination, how quick can the city clerk office post whatever edits,
Are you wanting this to be online?
I think it should be online. I don't know how else we can make that possible to.
Is it possible actually to have paper copies that people, if they were interested, that could come get one at City Hall as well?
We certainly could. I mean, that's how we do it with boards and commission. There's, right? Yeah.
Both.
Yeah.
I just didn't know if they wanted it online also. I just don't know as far as IT. I'm assuming if it's easy tweaks from the application we already have, that it wouldn't take them a lot of time to do.
Yeah, I like where you were going with that, Mayor, and I just pulled up our current application. I think the experience and or activities which you feel qualify you for this position is an excellent prompt. The present knowledge of the council, I think, is also a good question. I defer to Eric, but I think including something relating to conflicts of interest might be helpful, necessary.
Well, I mean, again, since this is a purely political decision for council to make insofar as who this person would be, and if they have conflicts that are going to create problems, then that's a fair question, and it'd be good for you to know. Mm-hmm. Sure.
And then I guess my biggest question is if we're not, I really like for commission appointments when we have the demographic information. But that is like a bit of a double-edged sword as well. So I don't know how people feel about requiring, well, not requiring it, but having it like we do on the commission application where it's optional, but, you know, people can answer those
Such
questions.
as age and race and those
Yeah.
kinds of things.
Yep.
If we can expand it to non-binary and, you know, and just be a little more inclusive, I would be okay with that.
Yeah.
So then the question would be, anything else? Okay. So I guess the question would be is if this council is comfortable based on the discussion today, if staff, and I know that Mayor Pro Tem Alter and I, we meet with the city manager's office tomorrow, and we can also include our attorney, Eric. If council is comfortable with us just kind of finalizing that discussion real quick tomorrow, and so that staff could go forth and create the final document. And if you all are comfortable, we can just give it a thumbs up and send it out electronically and have copies, paper copies in the city clerk's office.
I would be comfortable with that.
All right, so seeing majority of head nod.
I think we still have to vote on the.
Oh, we do?
Well, we have to vote on the item, but this is
On-
a helpful
on 12,
discussion.
fine.
No,
On
didn't
number
make up the
12.
discussion.
12.
I think one thing too I would add with that, and just as so we've mentioned of using these as a safeguard, the ability of people the public to gather signatures, just so that we make sure this process that we are like making sure people know the time windows for that, their availability to do such a thing. Because it is a little bit from the memo, it's a little bit confusing. There's like 2 stages, I think, to that, and just to make sure that in the interest of if we're going to do an appointment, that we are making sure our community, if they think this is an unwise decision, they know what they need to do to
Yeah,
be
Eric,
our
yeah.
safeguard.
Would we publish that in the newspaper or just on our webpage? or-
Right, so if the council decides to make an appointment and so forth, then we have to publish notice, and that's one of the state law requirements. And part of that, an element of that, is to point out the, the community's right to file that petition and so forth, exactly what you're addressing. Yeah.
All right, then.
So I think the sooner we decide these details, the sooner that publication would occur.
Well, yes and no. There's a window in which we need to publish, and that's between 4 and 20 days before the
Oh,
actual
right.
appointment.
Okay.
And I targeted the January 10th meeting for council. I figured maybe at your budget meeting was maybe not the time when you wanted to do this. Correct me if that was not right. But the next meeting is the January 10th meeting, and so we would need to track back between, the publication would have to be, no fewer than 4 days, no more than 20 days before January 10th.
Gotcha. What do people think about interviewing versus evaluating them like we do commission applications, or putting the onus on us to contact people who we want to speak with? How do we want to do that?
Question. Do we want to do, depending on the number of applications, do it like stages, like, try and, by looking at applications, narrow it down to a smaller number, and then, I think then at that point, group interviews would probably be more efficient than somebody trying to answer 7 different phone calls, or, you know what I mean? I'm just in terms of, or maybe that's not the way, but that's just my first thought.
Eric, would that?
Those would have,
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if we were to do it as a group interview, those would have to be open meetings, correct?
Yes.
Right.
And
right.
I think that's how Corval did it, not that that means that's how you have to do it, but that would be my recommendation, is that you folks do it as a group, as a whole council, yeah.
I did see, and no disrespect to Coralville, I did see that process, and I think there was great value there. But as I look at what we do now for our commission, for our, commission selections, there are some commissions where, we're all in and we're, people are contacting us, having those one-on-one discussions, or we're contacting individuals. I think, we can, bring people into a meeting and have them each, give their comments. But personally, I think I would find it more advantageous for me to talk one-on-one with individuals, and then we come back and we make our selections that way. But that's just me. And I do understand it won't be public, right, that I'm having these one-on-one conversations, but.
You're curious about the public.
So.
We don't care about the public
So
here.
I wonder if that's even something we have to nail down the actual.
We don't give a crap about public opinion here.
Well,
We've nailed down
yeah.
that level of detail at this point, so.
I think it's a good point, though, Mayor, because like during the normal process, regular election process, we hear from the candidates and we hear what their priorities are. And that's one thing that wouldn't be on that commission application is what do you see as your priorities? And that might be something we might want to add on there so that we know if affordable housing is their priority or transit or what it might be. So we kind of know where they're coming from.
I think we can have both and. So we could potentially have, as you were talking, I heard more like that when we were all going for our candidacy, we sat in a forum, and we all had 3 minutes of whatever. What I would suggest is that maybe we have people come up for 3 to 5 minutes that apply, and they just share whatever they want.
And you threatened to remove me by force.
What about
Call the police on
the
me.
question of winnowing, like you were saying, Sean? If we get 100 applications, are we committed to 3 minutes for each person? Because obviously any selection to get to the top 10 or something, or who knows, it would have to be public as well. Megan, go ahead.
I think that, I'm definitely in favor of winnowing, to get to kind of, a manageable number that honestly is respectful of everyone's time, including the candidates, right, or the applicants. If someone does it on a whim but really is sort of like, wow, I didn't expect I was going to have to talk about this, on the one hand, I don't want to make assumptions for anybody if they've applied, they're serious about it. But ultimately, if we have a lot of people applying, I think it just makes sense to me to get it down to a manageable number. I think in some regards that's mirroring the way a primary works. It's mirroring certainly how it works for job interviews. So I don't think that we're really doing anything unusual by approaching it in that way.
Would that be just 2 different consecutive meetings then? Like a public, one meeting to say, these are our top 5, and then another one that we would have, but I missed part of what you said, but 3 to 5 minutes where they would.
Like a forum where
they
they
would
tell what
have
their priorities are,
like,
right? Yeah.
And if by some reason we get 5 or less, or whatever that number is, less applications, then we don't need a first round meeting. We could always cancel a meeting maybe. I don't know how that would.
Well, sure, that's my question. I'm assuming that the winnowing be done by the whole council as opposed to, anyone
think
else.
so, yeah.
And then that could be done any number of ways. It's kind of a matter of your time management. Obviously, you could do that at the meeting on the 7th if you all just came in with, these are my 5 candidates. We're just going to, see from each of you, who your 5 are and add them up, and whoever, the 5 candidates are with the most votes are the ones that'll be interviewed by the council on the 10th. Or you could have a special meeting and have a, broader discussion or a lengthier discussion about it, or you can have a lengthier discussion on the 7th if you'd want, but I'm guessing that neither you nor staff probably want to do that, for that'll already be a long meeting. But yeah, scheduling a special meeting, whatever you want to do. Or it doesn't have to be the 10th. Like I said, I picked that rather arbitrarily, figuring it would be the earliest one, and you'd want that person to be as involved in the budget process as they could be. But, we could schedule it out if that's the process you folks chose.
Could we reverse engineer that just slightly and do the, going through the narrowing down our applications if necessary on the 10th, and then having a special meeting like 2 days later to make a final decision? like have them in and speak? I mean, I'm just trying to think of options here, maybe that spitballing a little bit.
I think, so the 7th is our Saturday budget work session, right?
I believe, I
Yes.
think it's a Saturday, but
Okay.
yes.
Kelly's saying yes.
Okay.
So
I
if,
trust Kelly.
I mean, I think what Eric was saying of if we have whatever it is, our top ones and just, you know, I think there's a high likelihood there will be a relative amount of consensus so that we'll be able to say, you know, these are the people who we want to say we would like to hear more from you. I really like the idea of setting that date, whether it's January 10th or another day. I like the 10th, that's my birthday. But I like the idea of setting that like definitively as soon as possible so that anyone who's thinking about it would know that we're talking about having a process where they may, you know, want to come in and speak to us. So yeah, I'd be in favor of kind of what Eric proposed, that we have, you know, we just get them numbered or something like that. If we can make that work timing wise, and then we just, like we did with strategic planning, we don't just
Carve 10 minutes
our-
out of the 7th or 15 minutes or whatever out of the 7th to do that part of the, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, if we had the applications due by the 3rd, or we can even move it to the 5th if, that week. Well, no,
That's
it
cutting
would
it
have to
pretty
be,
tight, yeah.
yes. It would have to be by the 4th Wednesday.
I'd have to, let me try to think this through. Well, are you thinking about the published notice issue or the, how much time you folks have to consider and review the applications?
Right.
Both of those? 2 days does not leave a lot of.
No, and that is true. So, I mean, certainly we can go, I mean, when I went for special election, it was literally about a month, so.
Right. Well, I mean, just thinking back, if you would like to make the ultimate selection on the 10th and are willing to do the winnowing on the 7th, then that's fine. We could, you know, if we publish closer to 20 days before, that would be, you know, December 20, 21st, something like that. So I think you would be fine. I mean, that would allow, you know, between, let's say, the 21st or 22nd, and it's not, we don't have a, you know, that's not as flexible as we would like it to be. It happens to be whenever the press citizen does their legal notices. But there would be at least a week in there, maybe a little more time if you made it due on January 3rd. If you wanted to do it on January 5th, we could. That would not leave a lot of time to, for us to get you all the applications and for you to consider them before the 7th, but that's kind of your decision as to how much time you think you'll need.
2 days is tight.
That's tight.
That's tight.
The 3rd.
I think the 3rd is good.
Do the 3rd.
If Kelly, is that feasible for you and your staff?
Well,
Thank you.
That was a good, funny
So
joke.
then, okay, all right. And then 7th, we'll come with our top numbers, although, I mean, there's a chance that there, you know, may not be more than 7 people.
Right.
So so I don't know if we say, you know, if there's 7 or more, you know, we will select. If not, I think we can certainly invite 7 people
yeah,
before
whatever
the
that number is,
council.
7's a reasonable.
Sure. Sounds good.
And then allow everyone that opportunity at that point. All right. And then,
Everybody what?
and then we'll have that meeting on the 10th.
Allow everybody the opportunity to
And
tell their story?
the publication, so just in thinking of this time frame, is
Ain't that right, David?
when can the application be live? I understand the publication, but like when can we actually start accepting applications?
Oh, I think your question is, can we begin accepting the applications before the actual vacancy? Is that what you mean?
Correct.
Yes, I believe we can.
Okay. Or before the publication?
Before, yeah, I'm sorry, yes.
Yeah, before the publication and before the end of the calendar year? Both?
Yes.
Both, okay.
Right. Yeah, both, sorry.
Okay.
It's, the publication is just ensuring that folks who are getting their word of this through the publication, and let's concede that that's probably not very many of them,
Correct.
have that opportunities to still put in their application prior to the deadline, which we're saying is the 3rd.
January 3rd.
Yeah.
Okay.
The press is
Good.
illegal. It's illegal. I have an important story. You guys
If-
are shutting me up.
Yeah, all right. Anything else?
So just to recap, maybe we can recap
Sure.
what we're doing.
Would you like me to try to spell out the chronology as I understand it?
Yes.
That'd be great.
So we'll publish a notice around December 21st, again, depending on when, I don't know what day of the week that is, you know. Yeah, well, we'll check with the Press Citizen, and it'll be no earlier than the 21st. It'll be the first available date on the 21st or after.
Okay.
And then applications will be due by January 3rd. If there are more than 7 applicants, you will do the winnowing at your meeting on the 7th, and then on the 10th, you will make the final decision.
Great.
And prior to that, I think have we given enough input as far as what should be on the application so that you and Mayor Pro Tem, Mayor, can get that finalized and get it published as soon as possible? Not published in the newspaper, but put online and had copies available as
Sure.
soon as possible?
Well, here's my question. Would you like, your next meeting is on December 6th, and, maybe you feel like we've had enough discussion now and you've laid it out and we can certainly just go forward with it, or you can approve kind of all this in an item on the 6th, including the application itself. It's entirely up to you. If you want to get it out sooner, then, there should just be a consensus that, as the mayor indicated, that the mayor pro tem, city manager, city clerk, and city attorney will get together, finalize based on the input that you provided tonight, and we'll put it out there so that folks can start applying.
To answer your question, I feel confident that we'll be able to review and get an application that we know that this council would approve.
I'm comfortable with that, yeah. I just wanted to clarify that
And
was.
then I think we get it out
Yep.
as soon as possible.
As soon as possible.
One other thing I would ask for council to consider is every Thursday, and I don't know how big of a deal this might be, but we upload any applicants that come in our info packet. One, it'll give us opportunity to speak to anyone and give the public opportunity to know who is actually applying. Typically, we wait for commissioners to all be published, at one time when there's an opening. For instance, if applications are due January 3rd, we wouldn't post until January 5th. So I think just to have it a little more transparent to the public, every Thursday in our info packet, as applications come through, we would just upload them in the info packet.
Once they start coming in?
As they start coming in, and then because we also want opportunities for, I'm sure people will reach out if they're interested in being on this council. They'll reach out to each of us, but I think it'll just.
I do have one question. Does that in any way, coming from like test taking background, so to speak, but does that disadvantage anyone who is brave and submits right away? Then others have an opportunity to be able to see what they've written. And they're working off of they have a model in front of them that they can work from. I don't mean that negatively. It's just that if somebody's doing this and it's a blank slate, then others can see it and go, oh right, okay, I can do da 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 da. It can jog a memory or what have you. I'm just wondering if that would unfairly disadvantage someone who was brave.
Council, I'm gonna get more repression.
If and I hear what you're saying, and I would agree. Then I would suggest that we move it up just 1 week to December 27th, that the applications are due, and then it'll be posted Thursday the 29th, and that'll give us 10 days, something like that.
So, I mean, I don't even think, I mean.
9 days.
That's fine. I was just going to say too, Megan Council Member Alter makes a good point. But, you know, if we were doing this as campaigns, it's the same dynamic. You know, if somebody were to launch a campaign, somebody else wants to launch a week later, they could see what the first, I mean, that's, I think that we're not in quite the same kind of testing situation. You know, it's not that different. So I'd be comfortable with either just like a week or two earlier starting to collect or whatever, but I think that's probably just the way, that's the way this cookie crumbles, I think, so.
That makes you make a really good point. I think it's more like I just wanted, if anything, for us to be aware of it as we're thinking about it and going through and vetting things. So, yeah, no, I didn't mean it as like, okay, so we got to take that off the table. Just raising it for conversation. So, but I think you're right, Sean. It definitely makes sense. Like, you know, this is a campaign situation, just albeit in a different mode.
So do we want to just push the deadline a week earlier and have more time to review them all? Or are we talking about doing sort of the rolling posting? Or maybe both?
Here's my one concern about that. So as I mentioned, we're going to try to publish as close as we can to the 21st. I'm a little uncertain whether that'll be the 21st, the 22nd, or 23rd, something like that. And so you would want to leave some time. And so I'm concerned if you're talking about having the due date be the 27th with of course the you know, some holidays in between there. That might not leave a lot of time for applicants. But that's a political decision, not a legal one.
We could publish on the 7th.
We could. No, we could not. Not if you wanted to appoint on the 10th, because it needs to be at least 4 days.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
See, this is why you're here. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay.
So January 3rd.
January
We're back to
3rd.
January 3rd.
We're back to January 3rd.
And-
So the question is rolling posting, right? Or rolling dissemination of applicants versus all at once, right?
And I'm fine taking my comment off the table. Rolling is fine.
No,
That-
it was
if
a
that
great
lends
point.
itself to the process that we've been talking about, that's fine by me.
No, I think it was important to bring up so that we just acknowledged it. And I think what Councilor Hermsen said is, it is like campaigning in a way. You know, people roll out whenever. And I think having as much transparency with the public as possible on these applicants is probably beneficial.
Why, you guys hide all the stuff you're doing?
So for Kelly's sake, is it cumulative? Like each week it's everyone who's applied that gets stuck in the packet, or just new ones, or do you care?
I think we keep it rolling where it's cumulative.
Okay.
And it's important that UNESCO knows who the
That,
applicants are.
that seems a little easier for us to handle, yeah.
Repression, political repression,
And maybe at the top,
from the top on down.
yeah.
you know?
I was going to say just their submission date, you know,
Yeah.
where you have like, these are the applicants and the date they submitted.
Cool.
Any
All right.
other?
So what I'm hearing is that I think we've got a timeline laid out. We're going to defer to the mayor and mayor pro tem and staff for the application process. So at this point, I don't see any reason to bring it up again on the 6th unless there's anything that you folks think it remains unresolved. I think staff, I'm going to look at staff here, I think we've got the information that we need.
You still need to vote?
We still need to vote, and again, I'll remind council that the first item is to fill by special election, and the second item is for appointment.
All right. So roll call for the special election.
Alter,
For special election? No.
special election, yes. I'm sorry, I acknowledge your vote is no. Burgess,
No.
Harmson,
No.
Taylor,
No.
Teague,
No.
Weiner.
No.
Motion fails 0-6. Item number 13 is filling council vacancy appointment. This is a resolution giving notice of intent to make an appointment to fill the council vacancy created by Janice Weiner's resignation. Could I get a motion to approve?
So move, Burgess.
Second, Taylor?
All right. Any additional staff comments?
not from me, thank you.
All right. Anyone from the public like to address this topic? Please state your name and city, and
Joe
there's a
Birdie,
sign in.
Marengo, Iowa. Joe Birdie, Marengo, Iowa.
Welcome.
Hi, how you doing?
Hearing no further
I
comments.
got 3 minutes. I got 2.5 minutes left.
Hearing no further comments. Council discussion.
I got 2.5 minutes left, Bruce.
You can speak on this
Then
item.
be quiet when I'm up on the stand then, please. Respect me for once. Thank you.
So this is filling a council vacancy appointment, and you're not talking about that item? And we're going to end your time now. Council discussion?
Mayor, just looking at what's in the packet of the notice. Okay, there's the resolution. All right. Sorry, I was trying to determine if we are actually approving the language of the notice, or do you?
I believe the language I put in the resolution says something substantially similar or
Okay.
something. We'll certainly make sure everything is compliant, given our discussion this evening.
Perfect.
Yep. All right. Roll call, please.
Burgess?
Yes.
Harmson?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Teague?
Yes.
Weiner?
Yes.
Alter?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0. Item number 14 is council appointments. Applicants must reside in Iowa City and be 18 years of age unless specific qualifications are stated. 14A is Board of Adjustment. Board of Adjustment, one vacancy to fill a 5-year term, January 1st, 2023 through December 31st, 2027. Council discussion at this point. So the Board of Adjustment has one vacancy with no gender balance required.
At first, I was a little confused by this one because one of the applicants, Mr. Baker, talked about that he wouldn't mind just filling it to bridge. And so I actually called him today to see what he meant by that and whether he would be interested in doing a full term then. And he said, oh, yes, he would definitely be interested in doing a full term. That at the time of his application, I think that was when we were filling. Oh, you want
One second.
Okay.
We're in council meeting, and please,
See you at 6 in the morning.
please,
I'll be sweeping the sidewalk in front of the cops.
we are having
You are
a
the one
discussion.
that's being rude.
We'll have a. I'm being rude.
Yes.
Please.
How am I being rude?
All right, we're going to continue with our council meeting at this point.
Speaking over people and interrupting people,
Well,
yes.
I didn't get my 3 minutes now, did I?
You didn't speak.
All right.
That's all right. Okay.
Yep, Councilor Taylor, you can continue.
Okay, I will continue with what I was saying. I spoke to Mr. Baker. He's well-known in the community and has served a lot of positions. But apparently, at the time when he filled this out in June, I believe there was an unexpected vacancy. And he was willing to serve then for temporary, but we didn't utilize him. But I would recommend putting him in this term now because he said he would do a full term. He'd be willing to.
At the top of the chain of command.
I'm comfortable with that.
The police
Larry Baker.
department does whatever Sue Dulick wants.
So Larry Baker is on the table for now. Any other consideration?
She don't care about any of y'all.
I would go with Baker as well, although I could only hear part of it because there was a lot of yelling.
All right. And I would support Baker, so we have majority of support there. So we'll go ahead and vote each one of these as we go. And so could I get a motion to appoint Larry Baker?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Taylor, seconded by Weiner. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes 6-0. All right, on to 14B, Climate Action Commission. Climate Action Commission, there are 3 vacancies to fill 3-year terms, January 1st, 2023 through December 31st, 2025, and this is council discussion. There is a gender balance requirement, and it's 3 females that we have to appoint.
I just want to open it up and say that this was an extraordinary batch of applicants. Very difficult, and we would be well served by all of them, honestly. So thank you to everybody who applied. A couple of names that rose to my attention were Elizabeth Fitzsimmons and Rebecca Nielsen. And there's a few others that I'll just put those 2 out as candidates that I think could really add unique perspectives while fitting into a more cohesive whole for the Climate Action Commission.
Is Climate Action one of the commissions that's open to people outside of Iowa City?
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
I liked Michelle Silman as well.
I also liked Michelle Silman. Although I had a question about her, Eric. She mentioned working for that North American Energy Company, ENGIE. Would there be any conflict of interest with that? I mean, we have a Mid-American Energy person, so would there be any problem with that?
Right. I don't think so. Certainly, if any issue would come up that would address her employer, she would need to recuse.
She'd have to recuse herself.
But,
Okay.
you know, much like we have a lot of people who work for the university, I mean, that would be fine. We could work around that.
I liked her as well and had the same question, so it's nice to have that answered in the positive or negative.
And Councilor Weiner, I believe you're the one that asked the question about Iowa City requirement. It's recommended, but as long as you're in Johnson County, and I believe, which one is it? Who is it that's...
Rebecca Nielsen, who works in emergency preparedness, lives in Tiffin.
Oh, okay. But I was looking, I think it was Jamie Gade lives in North Liberty. So there was a North Liberty person and a Tiffin person. And either one of those, I think, would be good. They might provide an additional perspective to the commission. So either one of those would be good.
So which names did you just give? I know you said Michelle Silman. You agreed with.
There was
Fitzsimmons, I think, was one of the names that was
Nielsen
mentioned.
and
Jamie Gade, I think you said.
and Jamie Gade. Jamie Gade
Okay.
was the North Liberty person, and
Okay.
was it Nielsen was the Tiffin.
Yeah, and then there's Michelle Silman. It's basically
Or
4
Silman.
out of 5 of the women seem quite well qualified at least.
But now we have to pick 3, right?
Right.
Yes.
For what it's worth, just to, and again, we have an embarrassment of riches here. The reason why I was interested in Elizabeth Fitzsimmons is because she's younger.
Yep.
Honestly, and is graduating out of UI, and it just seemed to me that there was kind of like younger energy as well as a wealth of knowledge, and she has a lot with prairie conservation. So again, that's a kind of a different angle than some of the other candidates. But again, each brings strengths. But I was kind of taken by the fact that she was younger, and it seems that the level of interest from generations that are just coming up now might be able to bring a certain something.
Kind of on a similar note, one of the things that jumped out at me with Jamie Gade's application was her background in health outcomes. And I think that's, to me, they all had good stuff in them, so it's.
She's worked with
But
climate
that
staff.
one did sort of jump up at me a little bit, and I thought that might be an interesting part of the mix, because I think that's, obviously when we're talking about climate action and health outcomes and resiliency, it all sort of plays together.
I mean, if I-
Okay. Oh, go right ahead.
Yeah, I would just, what would people think about Fitzsimmons, Gade, and Nielsen?
Yeah, that's kind of where I hear the majority leaning towards, and I can support those 3.
My number 1 was Michelle Silman.
Oh.
But I have no objection to the three you just named.
Oh, Silman is one of them.
Oh.
No.
No,
you
Selman,
didn't.
you didn't
But like
list.
the first four are so good, I don't know which this.
I'm sorry, which one did you say?
But I said what I was hearing was Fitzsimmons, Gade, and Nielsen, but that may not be the case.
We talked about
Wait.
Selman.
I had Silman, Fitzsimmons, Gade as my top three.
I want to make sure that I heard Councilor Weiner correctly. Silman?
No, I had not initially said Silliman, but
What name did you say then?
I said Fitzsimmons. I was hearing
Oh,
from
okay.
people. Gade, and then it sounds as if sort of the differences between Nielsen and Silliman, which of those for the number three, because it sounded like most people were interested in Fitzsimmons and Gade.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, as the mayor said earlier in the meeting, I have a loud voice. So I think I'm the only one who's actually been bringing up Fitzsimmons. I don't know if there's been head nods or not. But given that Silman has come up for several, I don't have a problem with that. Again, this has been an embarrassment of riches and it's wonderful, and there will be other opportunities. So I don't have a problem with
Oh, I was going to bring up Fitzsimmons. You just beat me to it.
Okay.
So, but I heard somebody say that between kind of Nielsen and Silman.
Is that, well, now I'm sort of hearing more Fitzsimmons, Gade, and Silliman. Is that correct?
I mean, I'm okay with either one of these. Laura, you said that was your number one pick. What was?
I
could
had
you elaborate a little more on
Silman, Fitzsimmons, Gade. If I had to rank them, that's the one, which I tried to make myself do.
I would agree with those three.
All right, so I do hear a shift to Fitzsimmons, Gade, and Silman.
Yep.
Yes.
All right. Majority for those? All right. So, could I get a motion to appoint Elizabeth Fitzsimmons, Jamie Gade, and Michelle Silman?
So moved.
Second, Taylor.
All right. Moved by Burgess, seconded by Taylor. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Item number 14C is Human Rights Commission. Human Rights Commission, there are 3 vacancies to fill a 3-year term, January 1st, 2023 through December 31st, 2024. And council discussion.
I just had a quick question for Kelly. How does 14C affect 14D with the gender balance?
Well, when we did the cover sheet for both, they're identical, so it's
right.
1 female, 2 male, and 1 none. So that balances out if you appoint all 4 people. So the 3 full terms and then the 1 unexpired. I think you could probably look at it all together and just decide who you're gonna
Oh,
do
okay.
the unexpired.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Which one of them would
Yep.
be the unexpired one? Okay, I
Yeah.
see. Okay.
So maybe I'll read the next one as well, because I think that might be helpful for us to discuss all at once. So 14D is Human Rights Commission. Human Rights Commission, 1 vacancy to fill an unexpired term upon appointment through December 31st, 2024. So we'll talk about the 3 vacancies to fill a 3-year term, and then the 1 vacancy to fill an unexpired term, and we'll have to determine who takes what. Now, the one that is unexpired, do we know what that gender?
It's a woman who stepped down.
Right, yes, it is. Yeah.
I think Kelly said it doesn't matter,
It doesn't
right?
matter
But-
who we
if
pick
you
as long
use-
as.
As long as, yeah,
The requirement.
As long as the group is
you
we're
have
fine.
4 spots.
3 female, 1 male.
All right, great.
I'll echo what's been said. I don't remember if it was Councilor Weiner or Harmson who commented on the number of qualified individuals. It just, it never ceases to amaze me here recently, the number of passionate, qualified individuals that have been applying for these boards and commissions. And their willingness to serve their community in this manner. It's quite obvious that they aren't applying just on a whim. They really, really want to do this. So I just wanted to make that comment. And I guess on that note, I think there was, as far as the male, one of the males, Mark Prees, has just finished his 1st term, I believe. And I think, this particular commission, I think, has a big learning curve when it comes to some of the grants and things that they make. I know some of my fellow commissioners or council members like to spread the wealth as far as membership on these, but I think it would be invaluable to keep him on for another term.
I did have two that I wanted to throw out there. Suyan Channon is one, and the other is Badri Kuku. And if you read on both of them, they have huge community ties that I think really speaks to representing various people that the Human Rights Commission deals with, and I would just throw their names out there for consideration.
I don't know if others were contacted, but TJ Dedu Norris contacted me, and I was very, very impressed with the conversation that we had. So I'd recommend them.
Yes, I can support TJ.
I would throw Kiran Patel's name out in there into the mix.
Karen Patel.
Thank you, Councillor Harmson. I had her name checked too. I know her through other things, and I know her to be a very responsible person, very dedicated. And if she sets her mind to something, or if she has an assignment, she's very dedicated to whatever she does. And I know she probably wasn't on other people's radar, so I appreciate you bringing her name up, Sean.
The two others that really stood out to me were, and I may not be pronouncing it, but it was Wifaq Mohammed and Janavi Pandya.
And then Jonavi.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, Janavi.
John V. I think it may be John V.
Any other names people want to throw out?
Ahmed Ismail.
Yeah.
Yep. Let's just expand it.
All right. So we have a lot of names out here today. All right. I think, maybe we go through, I'll read the names really quickly while people try to determine where their support wants to be off all of the names that's been submitted, although I would agree there are a lot of great people here. So I'll just read the names, and then we'll go back through, and then I'll just ask for people to where your support is. So we have one female, Suyan Cannon, one female, TJ I don't know how to
Dedu Norris.
Dedu Norris. One male, Ahmed Ishmael. A male, Badri Kuku. Female, Wafang Mohammed. Female, Janavi Padya. Female, Kiran Patel. And the last one I have is a male, Mark Priest. So we have a requirement for 2 males. So maybe I'll start with the males first. So we have, I count 3 males. It's Ahmad Ismail and Badri Kuku, and then Mark Priest. So we'll start with the Ahmed Ismail. So how many people support?
I support him.
I support him as well.
And I can support him, so we have that as majority. And then we'll go down to Badri Kuku, and I support him.
I'll support him.
I support him.
I do as well.
and support him. He actually attempted to reach out to me just as council was beginning, so I was not able to talk to him. But in and of itself, I know that the fact that there are people who are reaching out, shows initiative. So, and I liked what he had written in his application.
So we won't go to Mark under the mail, but we do have one non, and so we'll throw Mark in that category. Okay. So we'll start with the females. Now there are five females that we have listed. So I'll just go through their names, first names. Suyan TJ, Wifang, Janavi, and Karan. So we'll go to Suyan, and I support Suyan.
Now that we've narrowed it down, would it make sense to chat about, since we have a larger number to help us?
I guess we have an opportunity to either choose. I mean, we can throw Mark Priest in this unless.
Well, I like your idea of keeping them, because we have 2 male, 1 has to be female, 1 can be.
None.
I think maybe do this one first, and then we can do. Well, I don't care. It doesn't matter to me.
We need ranked choice voting.
There we go.
Because, I would support Suyun, but my number 1 was TJ. So I sort of have 1 and 2 with TJ and Suyun.
So in a way, since Mark Priest is the only one left, naturally, if he's selected, he's going to be under the none.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. He would absorb that spot.
And I think that works really quite nicely because he can help, as Pauline said, and actually very convincingly. It's like this can help sort of with continuity and transition, and help people kind of get on board.
I'm a huge Mark Priest fan, and I think that we have so many, and at the same time, my view is that we have so many really well-qualified people who always come forward with human rights that I'm going to have. As much as I love Mark Priest, I'm not going to support him because I think we need to give some of these other folks a chance.
Yeah, I love Mark Priest as well. I think he has done an outstanding job with the Human Rights Commission. Very dedicated, always in attendance, on time, on top of it. But we have been faced with a lot of applicants, great applicants. This is a highly desired commission. And I think we've made some hard decisions before. I'll just bring up V was one of the ones that, we absolutely would have loved to obtain them on the commission, but it was a hard decision that this council made, and look at them now. So always a hard thing, but absolutely love Mark Priest, but I won't support with all of these great applicants.
I can understand what all of you are saying, but I would caution you to realize that it's a total of 4 people, and it would be a total of 4 brand-new people on this very, I think, stressful, wonderful commission. But 4 new people on there, that's a big learning curve.
How many total are on the commission? 9, okay. Thank you for.
So I still stand for Mark Priest.
Okay. All right. So.
For the none position.
Sure. Sure. All right. So we'll go through, people say where they are, and then we'll add up at the end. So we'll go with Suyan Cannon. So I support Suyan. And I guess we get 2 votes. How about that? People get 2 votes.
Okay.
Sure.
Then yes, I'll go with her as well.
Okay.
Yes.
So I hear 3.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So I hear.
I'll support her.
So I hear 6. All right. So we're down to 1 other vote. And it can be a none, since we already did the female. So TJ, and I support TJ.
I support TJ. They're really amazing, you guys, just so you know.
Believe you.
Okay. We will move to Wifang.
Really long narrative, just hard to imagine. I mean, it's hard to imagine what, everything that she's been through and to get where she is. It just seemed to me like she would, when I looked at her and the one who came immediately after her in alphabetical order, that they both have a tremendous amount to offer. I don't even at this point know how to choose between them.
Okay. We all have one more vote. Well, wait a minute. I used up my. I guess if it didn't pass, we have one more.
This is why we need ranked choice.
Yeah.
We need to go back through.
So well, all right, we'll see where we end up.
Yeah.
So, Janavi,
I think she would be my other choice. If I supported Suyun, I think I would support Janavi. Sort of this combination at only about 25, service to refugees and immigrants, volunteers with the Native American population, anti-racism advisor, psychologist, Hindu, sort of a mix of stuff that I don't think that I've ever seen together in one person, which is what impressed me so much.
so I guess
Young age.
the question is, since TJ didn't move forward, can we now vote again, or is it possible that no one would get 4?
I think you can just move it forward.
So we can vote?
I don't know why not. Otherwise, it's going to be down to 1 and 1 and 1 or something like that. So
Well, I can support Janavi.
Sure.
Yes.
Me too.
So I hear majority. Okay, all right. So for now, let's determine who will get the shorter term. Do we flip a coin? Do we? How about
I mean, council's practice has often been if someone serves a partial term, then we'll consider them temp. So it's almost an advantage to have a partial term. Because usually, in the past at least, if someone wanted to continue to serve.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if we're looking for some rationale, do we? Johnny is a PhD student, which indicates to me that they might, I don't know where they are in their program, but they potentially, and this is a grasping at straws for just some sort of a rationale, right? Potentially would be, you know, if they're not done with their program and wanted to continue on, that'd be fantastic, but they also might have a, you know, be at a point in their program where they'd be looking, I mean, again, this is.
That's fine. I mean, I think we literally just sort of like throw a coin up in the
Yeah.
air.
Sounds good to me.
All right.
Yeah, okay.
All right, we're good. All right, so for the Human Rights Commission, the 3 vacancies to fill a 3-year term, we will have Suyan. Could I get a motion to appoint Suyan Cannon, Ahmad Ismail, and Badri Kuku? And then for the 1 year, for the 1 vacancy for an unexpired term upon appointment through December 31st, 2024, I also will need a motion to appoint, and you said it better than I did.
Janvi Pandya.
Janavi Pandya.
Yep.
Could I get a motion, please, to appoint them as mentioned?
So moved. Alter.
Moved by Alter, seconded by
Armson.
Armson. Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 6-0. 14E, Parks and Rec Commission. Parks and Recreation Commission, 2 vacancies to fill a 4-year term, January 1st, 2023 through December 31st, 2026. Council discussion. I will point out that, this is another one where there's a lot of great applicants.
Yep.
Rachel McPherson, one, she's a phenomenal person and has a lot of, I think she can contribute a lot to this commission, but I also wanted to point out that, and this isn't giving her any advantage here, but McPherson Park, that is James McPherson Park, that's her father. She was very involved with a lot of the things that took place with the renaming of that park. I think she'll be a great candidate for this park. And while I'm also just throwing out names, I will just throw out Dolores Mixon. I looked at her application. What we're used to seeing on applications, hers just didn't actually have. So I've talked to her about her application. She called, and I think she called the majority of us, if not all of us. And I think she would also be a great person to be on this commission. Other names?
I agree with you as well, Mayor, but I would also, just to sort of throw out another name just to talk over, if nothing else, to say, wow, this is a really interesting individual, is Aaron Broge. And I believe that he came up before us in an earlier cycle of Parks and Rec. And this may not be his cycle either, but I think he has a lot of interesting experience that would be very suitable. So just to make it so that it, because we didn't have enough to talk about in the last commission, so I just I would bring that up.
And the gender balance requirement here is 1 female and 1 non.
Right.
Any other names to throw out?
The only other name I'd throw out sort of for consideration is sort of bringing someone into the fold is Karen Crane.
I was also considering her. She seemed to have a really good understanding of the commission.
Okay. Any other names? So we have 4 names, 3 females and 1 male. So maybe we'll start with the non first and then see where we end up. Well, I think we can probably just go through all the names and see where we end up. So Aaron Broge. Karen Crane. And I guess I'm looking for people that support.
Oh.
So I'll go through all the names. Let me go through all 4 names one more time.
All right.
I'll go through all 4 names one more time. So Aaron Broge, Karen Crane, Rachel McPherson, Dolores Mixon. So we only get 2 votes. So Aaron Broge.
Mayor, would it make more sense to go ask each of us what our top 2 are?
Oh, that works. It's only 4, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll start on we're going to start with you.
All right. Okay.
And then we're going to you, Mayor Pro Tem.
I would say Rachel McPherson and Karen Crane.
All right.
And I'll go out of order and say I agree.
And I will also say those were my top 2, Crane. And I like your argument about McPherson. That's kind of interesting. Nice connection there. So Crane and McPherson for me.
Your idea just went down the drain, but all right.
Sorry, I tried.
You didn't follow the rules.
All right.
I would have gone with McPherson and Mixon.
Okay.
So overlap, but not exactly the same.
Okay.
And ultimately, that's who I would have or will support, I guess, or
So,
my choices were the same as Sean's.
all right. So McPherson, I support. So that makes it. Mixon, I have. So that's 3. And then it's 3 for Karen Crane. And we're kind of, so, which is narrowed down. So I guess the question is, where do we want to be? So, anyone willing to flop?
Well, I'll tell you that, I don't feel strongly, but the main reason that I put forward Karen Crane is because of all the folks who are dealing with the swimming and the pools and so forth, in discussions with her and also seeing her outside in the community, I've really able to talk with her and have conversations. And I thought it would be really good to have somebody who could have those conversations as part of the process. And that was why I was interested in her. But
That was also why I was interested in her.
But I don't know, because she had so little, and I did not end up talking to her, I don't know anything about Dolores Mixon, because there was really.
Yeah.
I guess from that same vantage point, that was partially, I know Dolores, and I mean, she will throw all in to, get involved and to understand what's going on. But she also has a voice and some experience throughout the city in groups that typically Parks and Rec doesn't really reach. So that's part of the reason why I think that her interest is really important and her voice.
I'll switch to Dolores.
Okay. So we have a switch to Dolores, which that's the majority there.
Yep.
So for Parks and Rec Commission, could I get a motion to appoint Rachel McPherson and Dolores Mixon?
So moved, Harmson.
Second, Weiner.
All right. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes 6-0. We are on to Public Art Advisory Committee. Item number 14F. Public Art Advisory Committee, one vacancy to fill a 3-year term, January 1st, 2023 through December 31st, 2025. Council discussion.
There's only one, it had to be a female, and the only person of the two who was also well
Yes.
qualified,
Yes.
willing to serve again, is Andrea Truitt.
Yep.
I agree.
And
Fantastic.
And this is one of those examples where they served an unexpired term, or they took over a term. So this would be an opportunity for a full term, which council typically has leaned towards, but not all the time. So I can support it. And sound like majority is there. So can I get a motion to appoint Andrea Truitt to the Public Art Advisory Committee?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Teller, seconded by Burgess. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Item number 15 is announcements of vacancies new. Applicants must reside in Iowa City and be 18 years of age unless specific qualifications are stated. Senior Center Commission, one vacancy to fill an unexpired term upon appointment through December 31st, 2023. Applications must be received by 5 p.m. Tuesday, January 3rd, 2023. Could I get a motion to accept correspondence?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Burgess, seconded by Weiner. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Item number 16 is announcements of vacancies previous. Applicants must reside in Iowa City and be 18 years of age unless specific qualifications are stated. Historic Preservation Commission, one vacancy to fill an unexpired term, and that's for East College Street. Historic Preservation Commission, Woodlawn Avenue, one vacancy to fill an unexpired term. Housing and Community Development Commission, one vacancy to fill an unexpired term. Library Board of Trustees, 1 vacancy to fill an unexpired term. Applications must be received by 5 p.m. Tuesday, January 3rd, 2023. Airport Zoning Board of Adjustment, 1 vacancy to fill a 5-year term. Airport Zoning Commission, Iowa City Representative, 1 vacancy to fill a 6-year term. Board of Appeals, HBA Representative or qualified by experience or training, 1 vacancy to fill a 5-year term. Board of Appeals Licensed Plumber, 1 vacancy to fill a 5-year term. Historic Preservation Commission, Jefferson Street, 1 vacancy to fill a 3-year term. Senior Center Commission, 2 vacancies to fill a 3-year term. Vacancies will remain open until filled. Item number 17 is City Council information.
Yeah, I had the great pleasure of attending the Iowa National Guard's sort of Civilian Leadership Day this morning. Really learned a tremendous about the National Guard, the huge amount actually of federal funding that comes into it, that they don't just work overseas, but when they were instrumental in helping out, and particularly in Cedar Rapids after the derecho, clearing roads so that then to allow the utility companies to get in afterwards. And I think the piece that many of us may not realize is how much work they did during COVID. It was their headquarters in Des Moines that was used as the command center, including for the governor. They were busy transporting tests all the way by air, all the way from Sioux City to the hygienic lab in Coralville. They actually did a huge amount of work in COVID. So really helpful and informative session.
Great. I'd like to remind folks that this Thursday, the 17th, is the Employee Appreciation Lunch from 11 to 1 at Terry Trueblood Recreation Area. I hope to see many of our city employees there. It's always been very enjoyable to do that, and we've kind of had a few years not doing it. So each and every one of you employees, those that are listening and then hear this broadcast, you play a valuable part in the city's ability to provide necessary services to the community, and I look forward to seeing as many as I can this Thursday. And just a quick note, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that it's my granddaughter's birthday, 8-year-old birthday, and so happy birthday to her. I don't know if she's watching, but save me a piece of cake.
All right.
Well, last Thursday on the 10th, there was the Better Together 2030, I'm forgetting the name of the event, where they gave out the Bravo and Sizzle Awards. That was just a really, really good event, really good time, and a number of city employees and community leaders and volunteers who were recognized there. So it's just exciting to see the work that so many put into Project Better Together that came out of COVID, moving forward and really keeping energy going. So.
On Friday, there was the Truth Giving at the Englert, and that was put on by Great Plains Action Society, which is the executive director is Sakawas Novus, who was on our Truth and Reconciliation Commission. This was really a great organized event. There are people from out of the state that came in to share some stories, but the music was phenomenal. People were dancing the night away, and so was I. It was a great time of both history telling as well as enjoying some of the tribal music. All right. If no other comments, looking above to the voice in the air. Our Mayor Pro Tem. All right. We'll go on to item number 18, which is a report on items from city staff. We'll start with our city manager's office.
Nothing tonight, Mayor.
City Attorney's Office.
One brief housekeeping matter, Mayor. You may recall that at your last meeting, you deferred the UI Labor Center agreement to this meeting. There were some kind of late-breaking requested changes, and so as a result, we weren't ready to bring it forth today. We hope to have it for you at your December 6th meeting. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. City Clerk.
Nothing from us. Thanks.
All right. Awesome. Item number 19 is adjournment. Could I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Taylor, seconded by Burgess. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? We are adjourned.